Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201. Father and daughter sending money. Big sauce pork ribs, salt and pepper pork ribs, sweet and sour pork ribs, braised pork, steamed pork with rice flour, stewed pig's feet. Nanling really went big and made all kinds of delicacies with the pig that Xin brought. God has mercy on him. He woke up many times in the middle of the night with tears flowing from his mouth, but he never had the chance to cook before. Now, he can finally cook all the dishes that he has reviewed many times in his mind. Xin couldn't put his chopsticks down. He sighed again and again. Your cooking skills are really amazing. It's really a blessing to be your wife. Nanling smiled and said, in fact, I haven't made these for my wife yet. Xin was surprised for a moment, and he asked, why is that? Nanling said, it's mainly because I found that she has no special preference for other dishes or categories except apples and fish. I'm afraid she won't like it. The excuse is mainly that he can't make up his mind to spend so much money to buy ingredients to please his wife. He didn't have much money, so he had to save it for the future. Well, he suddenly realized a problem. What else could he do with the money he saved? Find a wife. Nanling laughed and shook his head. Xin patted his shoulder and said earnestly, don't be so cautious. Be a real man and be bold. If you cook for her, will she dare not eat it? Come on, we can't finish these dishes anyway. You take half of them and heat them up for your wife when she comes back. I like them, so there is no reason why she doesn't like them. Nanling was not vague when he heard it, and immediately took some back. He was just reluctant to spend money, but the wine partner in front of him was a generous person, which was really good. So the host and the guests had a good time again. This time Xin brought another large bottle of good wine, but he didn't ask about the remaining half bottle. Nanling's alcohol tolerance was much better this time, mainly because of his physique. And this level of spiritual wine would not improve him that much. Of course, he didn't value the improvement brought by spiritual wine that much. At this time, Fanna came to him again. It turned out that he had made an appointment with someone else again. Nanling had no choice but to simply suggest that Mo should be the operator and he could just do some light work. Fanna did not refuse, and let him replace Nanling's previous position as the main controller of the operation, while Nanling was distracted by playing games while drinking and chatting with his drinking buddies, which was not a big deal. After a few games, Mo's operation was also stable, but the gap had already appeared. That is, he performed slightly worse in defense or organization, and his response speed was also slightly slower. This discovery even shocked Fanny, because she did not expect Nanling to be a more versatile existence than Mo. Of course, this is a game after all, and Mo's knowledge and abilities are far more than these aspects, so it is biased to compare Mo and Nanling's abilities based on this. Moreover, the opponents they met were not very powerful, so they could just play around. Nanling had no problem distracting himself at this time, but then he received a call from Gichen. He unexpectedly connected the call. Uncle Gu, do you have something to talk to me about? Gichen, I heard that you have formed a team. What does that girl have in mind? Good guy, is Nanling a spy planted next to Fan and I? Nanling didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but after thinking about it, he answered. Yes, Boss Fan and I want to participate in the finals of the virtual war competition. There is nothing to hide about this plan. With Fan and I's IQ, it should be impossible to hide it. Gichen pondered for a moment and said, okay, but I have a prerequisite. Nanling was surprised. Why did he tell him about this? Gichen had already answered to himself. It's just that Fan and I's Jindan cultivation is still a little dangerous. I hope that before going to the Star Federation, at least one of you, Mo and Thongship, can break through to the Jindan realm. And I can use this as an excuse to seek the position of commander of the escort fleet. You have to work hard. Nanling didn't understand what was going on. He asked, is it very dangerous over there in the Star Federation? He was actually doing three things at once. While chatting with Xin, he was paddling in the Legion Battle of Galaxy Ferry and discussing important information with Gichen. That is, his thinking ability at this time can support him to do this step. Gichen said lightly, the background of this game is not simple. It appeared too suddenly and its purpose is too strong, so we should be more vigilant. Nanling said unexpectedly, could it be that Galaxy Ferry can intercept the consciousness of all the players? Gichen paused for a moment, and then said in a rather speechless tone, What are you thinking about? I just think that this game can be done better and there are more battle terrain options, but it always uses an extremely dense asteroid belt as the battlefield map. This specific terrain is two-directional, and the senior executives of the Gear family have noticed that the operating company behind this game has a good background, so they guessed that they should have other purposes. Nanling immediately said after hearing this, "Then I will persuade Boss Fanner to play another game." He was scared. He really didn't want to get involved in such a complicated matter. Gye Chen said, "This is not necessary. We are just going to the Star Federation. We can guarantee our safety." Nanling hesitated and said, "No, I feel insecure in this situation. I have to find a way to get some information." Gye Chen asked, "Do you have any channels?" Nanling thought about it and said, "I'm going to ask Dai Ting if there is any information about this." He missed his mother a little, and he didn't know where Rose's mother was now. Gye Chen said, "Okay, you go and contract her, I will give you the activity funds." As he said that, Nanling found that 3 million Lingzhu points appeared in his account. Good guy. He was stunned. Gye Chen said, "These first, if it is not enough, ask me again. If there is any left, you can keep it as your reward. It's really generous. It's worthy at being a dog-rich man." But the money Gye Chen gave was actually calculated. After all, it is definitely not easy to check the background information of a big force. The market price of general intelligence organizations is about 3 million. If Nanling is able to obtain intelligence at a lower price, then the remaining money is Nanling's bonus. And if Nanling needs more money to purchase intelligence, then Gye Chen will not care. From this perspective, this generosity is really worthy at father and daughter. Nanling cried to death, thinking that it was too happy to work for this father and daughter. So he temporarily ended the conversation with Gye Chen, and sent a message to Madame Rose. "Is Mom here?" Although Madame Rose asked him to call her aunt, but he couldn't stand his thick skin. However, because he knew that Madame Rose should still be flying in hyperspace, he didn't care for a while, but continued to eat and drink with Jin. But who would have thought that Madame Rose would reply not long after? "Your little thing, why did you suddenly think of looking for me? What's the matter?" Nanling was surprised, and then he remembered that Madame Rose could move freely in hyperspace flight, so what's wrong with replying to him in hyperspace? So after a brief greeting, he told her about the Galactic Fairy. Chapter 202 Black-Hearted Mother and Son. Nanling received a very detailed intelligence from his mother, Madame Rose. After knowing his request, Madame Rose did not hesitate at all and directly gave him the relevant information of the listening organization. Nanling was greatly surprised when he saw this information, because he saw the name of a brand new organization, Xingcan Pioneer. And the information he got also included the origin of Xingcan Pioneer. This turned out to be a superpower that originated from Tianzing Star. It's just that it originated from Tianzing Star, but it is not the behind-the-scenes power of Tianzing Star. Instead, it is a loose alliance formed by a group of top pioneers gathered together. The name of Galaxy Fairy Guest sounds full of romance, but the alliance of Xingcan Pioneers is the most romantic people among humans. Of course, from the information given by Madame Rose, this is actually a group of rich kids who have nothing to do and run around everywhere. It's just that they have made considerable achievements, so they call themselves Xingcan Pioneers. Madame Rose gave a summary. This group of people are actually very cute. They are all idealists and take it as their responsibility to find a way out for mankind. Nanling suddenly felt enlightened when he heard this. He did not notice who the Xingcan Pioneer was, but heard some other meaning from it. There is no way out for mankind. However, the level he was at was still too low, and he did not feel much at the moment. He just asked, "Then Rose Mom, how much do I want for this information?" Mrs. Rose said helplessly, "Call me Auntie. As for whether it is money or not, your little guy is talking to me about this." Nanling quickly said, "It is sponsored by a big dog owner." Mrs. Rose understood instantly. She said, "This information actually depends on the circle. If it is someone in the upper circle, it will not cost much to buy it, and if someone who is not in this circle wants to buy it, it must be 3 million. Nanling praised, "Mom, this estimate is really accurate. The funding I got is 3 million. Mrs. Rose listened and pondered. "Is the sponsor your eldest lady or the eldest lady's father?" Nanling said, "It is her father, Gye Chen." Upon hearing this, Madame Rose said happily, "This is easy to handle. Gye Chen is already considered a person on the edge of that circle. I heard that he has a great chance to cultivate into an essence soul. By then, he will really soar to the sky. People like this have a discount when buying intelligence from dieting. According to the rules, we can actually sell intelligence for 1.2 million here. Well, I'll give you a price of 2 million, so that Martin can earn more. Nanling said as soon as she heard it. Why don't you make it 2.8 million, make more money, and it will sound better when I report it. This mother and son are discussing how to divide the money. Madame Rose said, how can this be done? Although your wife is rich, as a man you always have to keep some money around to do your own things, otherwise how can you ask your wife for money for everything? Nanling thought it made sense, so he said, thank you again, 2.6 million, so that I can earn 400,000 inches one go, which is not a small amount. Mom, after all, you still have a lot of important things to do, and you need money everywhere. Madame Rose sighed and said, okay, I didn't expect you to start to care for others. She was really touched. She said, you can tell your Uncle Yu that if he cultivates to the nascent soul stage, he can sell information here at a 50% discount. He didn't forget to solicit business, but how to say it, the buyer and the seller are mother and son, which resulted in the difference between them earning more than the money received by the dieting organization itself, which is really a bit helpless. This is called a black-hearted mother and son meeting up the upper and lower houses. The mother and son discussed the price, and then Nanling paid the money. Madame Rose even gave a copy of the dieting organization's electronic receipt. The two of them really didn't violate any procedures in their operation. After getting the receipt, Nanling was not in a hurry to send the information to Gichen. If he acted too quickly, wouldn't it seem that there was no difficulty? But after he and Chen had eaten and drunk enough, and agreed to meet again next time, he sent the information out. Gichen replied unexpectedly quickly. How come it was so fast, and the price is not high? It seems that you're very capable. Nanling immediately said modestly, actually, I think this should be related to my uncle. I found that my uncle has a good reputation in these intelligence organizations. When they learned that I was working for my uncle, they were actually willing to lower the price. It's just that I was worried that it would delay things if I delayed for too long, so I didn't continue to bargain for the price. I bought it directly when it was almost the same. Gichen was immediately interested when he heard it. Look at this kid, not only is he capable, but he also speaks so nicely. He said, why is that? Nanling then said, it seems that my uncle has a good chance of cultivating into a nascent soul. I just vaguely feel that after the nascent soul, it is another level. Gichen was silent for a while when he heard it, and he sighed. I see, this is another reminder for me. It seems that because Nanling's honesty satisfied him, Gichen said some heartfelt words. For cultivators of my generation, strength and realm are the most important things. If there is no strength and realm to support you, everything you have now may be taken away by others at any time. Gichen's perception is actually not in line with the current era, because the upper class of this era generally pays attention to the power and interests of the group. But Gichen's understanding of the law of the jungle actually points to the essence, which may be the key to his thorough self-improvement. Nanling immediately replied respectfully, I have learned from you. I will definitely focus on self-cultivation. Gichen nodded with satisfaction and said, I know about your affairs. You are talented, reliable, and sincere and honest. If you are not already my daughter's subordinate, I would really like to recruit you to work under me. This is a complete cherishment of talent. Nanling said, Uncle, when I work for Boss Fanny, am I not also working for you? Gichen also said after hearing this, that's right, I can feel more at ease with you being with Fanny. Don't worry, I will say hello to Lingyi's family for you, and you and Mo's child are a good match. Nanling nodded and then ended the call. Just like that, 400,000 Lingzhu points were obtained. Nanling was very happy at the time. He couldn't help but open the online shopping list and began to empty the shopping cart. He bought lotus seeds. By then, the bay at the door will be full of colorful flowers, and there will be lotus roots and lotus seeds to eat, which is wonderful. Then he bought green vegetable seeds, which are prepared to be planted on the hillside of the back mountain. By the way, I have to buy a few apple saplings, and then I will plant apples for motor wheat. Nanling's shopping desire was very strong, and he bought a lot of things in one go. He is really a guy who can't save money. Chapter 203 Solving the Trouble. After that, Nanling stayed at home fishing, growing vegetables and raising lotus. Even Fanny went to school every day and didn't know what she did. Why was she fighting with others every day? He had to devote some of his energy to participate in such battles. Therefore, he had to express his feelings. There were too many temptations for people in this era, and they had no time to practice properly. He was really busy. After all, that drinking partner would come to drink and eat meat every now and then, and he also started to bring new friends. Nanling's drinking partners became more and more, and everyone naturally praised his cooking skills. Among them, the name and appearance of an old man surprised Nanling. The old man was called Thongshu, and he looked quite handsome. He was quite similar to Thongship, a colleague that Nanling didn't know very well. Nanling felt a little painful. Wouldn't his social circle expand to his colleagues' families? Especially since he and these people were brothers all day long. Forget it, don't think about those strange generations. Nanling had a hammock by the river, and was now leisurely leaning on it, looking at the scenery in the river bend. The lotus had grown, and although it had not yet formed buds, it was already lush and green and quite pleasing. Nanling felt that he should build a small pavilion in the water, and then he would feel like a pretentious scholar. Then he would think of a way to make some kind of mist and rain special effects for himself, which would be really poetic. Nanling's thinking was very broad, but unfortunately he could only think about it, because the 400,000 intelligence feeds he had earned before were spent again. It was really a waste. In fact, it was not that he wasted it, but all of it was spent on various drawings of the instrument-making academy and the formulas and methods for making spiritual instruments. This was really spending money. Of course, all the money was necessary, so he mastered some tricks to turn spells into spiritual arrays, and exchanged many formulas as application examples. This was all the money spent. If it weren't for Brothers Shan, who often brought his old brothers to help with wine and food, Nanling felt that his family would soon be unable to make ends meet. But that night, after Mo drove Fanny back in a luxury shuttle, Nanling found that she hurried upstairs, and then there was a rather chaotic spiritual power riot. The magnetic field of the whole room changed as a result, and strong static electricity swept the whole place, and Nanling's hair stood up. He was very anxious. What was wrong with Mo? He waited for a while, and when the spiritual power fluctuations stabilized, he sent a message to ask, "Why is there a spiritual power riot, but what's the problem? I'll come up and take a look." Mo said, "No need to come up, I'm sweating a lot and ready to take a shower. It's okay now, don't worry." Nanling has already expressed his guess. But the cultivation has reached the peak and it can't be suppressed. Mo said, "It can still be suppressed." Nanling asked puzzledly, "Why do you have to suppress it? Why don't you break through the realm?" Mo said, "Fanny is in high spirits now, let's wait until this period of time is over." Nanling. ... He felt very embarrassed because his wife and the boss had a conflict of interest. What should he do? So after pondering for a moment, he suddenly had an idea. He sent a message to Gyu-chen. "Uncle Gyu, can you take Boss Fanny back and disconnect from the internet for a few days?" Gyu-chen asked curiously, "Why is that?" Nanling said, "Mo is going to break through. Breaking through the realm can satisfy Gyu-chen's requirements for the strength of Fanny's team, which is a big deal." Gyu-chen understood immediately, and he said, "Okay, I'll bring her back right away." Nanling said, "Wait, if you force it, it may affect your father-daughter relationship. It's better to find a better excuse for her to go with you voluntarily." Gyu-chen said, "With her temper, it's useless to talk to her nicely. It's better to force her to do it." Good guy. Nanling probably understands why the relationship between this father and daughter is so tense. Fanny is a super naughty girl. If the liveliness in her bones is suppressed, she will certainly feel uncomfortable. Nanling thought about it and said, "Why don't you tell Boss Fanny about the virtual championship?" Gyu-chen answered unhappily, "What do you mean? How can you listen to her bad temper?" Nanling carefully answered, "For example, you directly pointed out her plan, and then said that she was too weak to protect herself unless she trained with you for a period of time." Gyu-chen did not respond. But after a while, there was a knock on the door of the house. Mo simply wrapped a bathrobe around her and peeked down from above, saying, "Xiaonan, go check what's going on. I'll go get dressed." Nanling opened the door and saw Fanny rushing in and shouting, "Mo, where's Mo?" Nanling said, "She's changing clothes." "What's wrong?" Fanny smelled the smell of shower gel in the bathroom and suddenly asked in a bit of a sly way, "Did I ruin your relationship?" Nanling said unhappily, "No, Sister Mo and I are innocent." Fanny rolled her eyes and said, "You're husband and wife. I find it particularly funny to use the word innocent to describe you two." At this time, Mo came down from upstairs and said, "I was wondering why you acted so quickly at the time, leaving me no time to regret. So you just wanted to make fun of me." Mo seemed angry. Fanny rushed up and hugged her for a while, humming and groaning like a little animal. Nanling looked at her with envy. Then Mo hugged her helplessly and asked, "What happened?" Fanny said, my father is going to give me special training, so I have to leave for a while. Nanling said in his heart, good guy, this Uncle Gyu is really quick. Mo asked in surprise, why so sudden? Fanny sighed and said, because he knows that I am going to leave Chuxing through the virtual war competition of Galaxy Xiang. Damn, it must be that Thongsha who told the secret. Nanling immediately looked up at the ceiling and pretended that he didn't hear anything. Thongsha, nephew, you just take the blame for your Uncle Nanling. At worst, I can prepare more delicious food for your father, brother Thongshu. Fanny continued, let's not talk about the guy Thongshu. My father didn't scold me again this time. He just asked me to go back for special training. Mo, you know my father has a bad temper. It's rare that he is going to let me go this time. I must train seriously and not let him look down on me. Well, in fact, I also want to train well. If I meet the Death Star pirates again, I can't let Shion and Ou save me. I want them to look bad. Mo didn't doubt it after hearing it, and was very supportive of it. She said, okay, then you go. Fanny asked, what about you, will you be lonely if I leave? Mo said, if you leave, I will go into seclusion. You will also have special training, and I can't fall behind too much. Fanny nodded seriously and said, okay, let's work hard together as sisters. Then she looked at Nanling and said, and you should also practice well for me, okay? You are also a very important friend of mine. I don't want to gradually become alienated because of the growing gap between us. Nanling. ... He found that he had nothing to say. She could only complain to Gye Chen in the communication. You are really quick. Gye Chen praised. Your words are very useful. It's rare to talk to her so calmly. You are really a very reliable child. Nanling felt extremely tired. But fortunately, this way, all three parties were satisfied. Chapter 204. Fanny is gone. The years are peaceful. Fanny ran away in a hurry again, and went home to retrieve to receive special training from her father. Mo looked at the smiling Nanling in front of her, and suddenly came to her senses. Why did Fanny's father suddenly come to her senses and wanted to give her special training? It happened just when she had just revealed that she was a little bit unable to suppress her state. Isn't it too coincidental? Moreover, this kind of quietly doing a thing to the satisfaction of all parties has always been Nanling's best. She glanced at Nanling, but did not say it out loud, just said coldly, I'm going to retreat. Nanling immediately nodded and said, I will protect you. Mo said, tell your friends who only care about food and wine not to come during this period. Nanling immediately said, don't worry, I know the seriousness. Zhen and others cried to death. Friends who brought their own food and wine are friends who only care about food and wine. Can you change the description to a better one? She nodded and said, then I will go to breakthrough, and after completing the breakthrough, I will consolidate it for a while, and then share my experience with you. Nanling nodded repeatedly after hearing this. This is indeed something he values very much. Then Mo said, you should study hard during this period of time and don't neglect your studies. Nanling nodded again. Mo turned to go back to her room, but turned back and said, I'll give you some more money. Save money and don't spend it lavishly. Nanling found that a sum of money had arrived and took a look, 50,000. It's not much, but it's definitely enough for living expenses. He was definitely touched, but there was a problem. Such a Mo made him feel like he was raised as a son. He continued to respond obediently. Mo walked up a few steps, and suddenly thought of something and turned back and said, behave yourself these 2 days and don't go out to cause trouble. I'm afraid I can't take care of it. Nanling was speechless. He simply pushed Mo's back up and said, I know. I have to guard the gate for you during this period of time. How can I have the time to go out and cause trouble? Mo was pushed upstairs by him and then stopped. Nanling secretly wiped the sweat off his face and felt very helpless. As expected of Mo's mother, she really has a motherly personality. Mo was in seclusion, and Nanling simply used his authority to set the entire building to a closed state. It was a real closed state. A black iron curtain-like energy shield appeared on the top of the building, covering it completely. This is a function that the building itself has. Nanling did not stay in the shield, but chose to live outside the shield. Suddenly Mo sent a message. Why did you seal the building? Where do you live? Nanling smiled and said, it is most important that you are not disturbed. I can live in the building opposite. At this time, Mo had taken off the intelligence core and turned off his spirit furnace and auxiliary instrument. He communicated with Nanling using a communicator. This was just like when Nanling watched her practice the method of essence and energy. The video was always open, and he could help in time if there was any problem. He did not live in the small building on the opposite bank, but lay directly on the hammock next to the small building. When Nanling was in seclusion, he would fiddle with his vegetable garden every day, check on the growth of the lotus, and occasionally go fishing to enjoy himself. He should not live too carefree. Without Fanny to drag her back and forth, Li Ji simply lived in her own dormitory at the Taikuno 5 space station most of the time, and would occasionally come to Nanling to chat or ask for wine. Home she was said to be even more free, and he resumed his most adapted pace of life, attending classes seriously at the Commander Academy every day. In short, when Fanny was away, everyone was living a peaceful life. At this time, Nanling's drinking buddies came again. A group of people came with wine and meat, and they looked very happy. Nanling saw this and hurriedly went up to SYNOPSIS and the others and said, "Brothers, please wait, my wife is in seclusion to break through, so we don't want to make noise here. Brothers, why don't you be patient for a while, and wait until my wife succeeds in breaking through, and then I will invite everyone to drink together." A group of old brothers showed regretful expressions, but Xin asked with a smile, "Brother Nanling, your wife is in seclusion to break through, which realm is she going to break through?" Nanling said, "Of course she is going to break through to the golden core stage." A group of old brothers showed concerned expressions and asked, "She has already reached the golden core stage, are you sure?" Nanling thought about it, and then said confidently, "With my wife's accumulation, it will naturally come naturally." Xin seemed to be relieved. Nanling said again, "Then, when my wife comes out of seclusion, I will introduce her to you brothers." Xin immediately shook his head and said, "Forget it, women have nothing to do with our brothers' affairs." Nanling thought it made sense. As a result, Thongshu's father Thongshu said regretfully, "I don't know how long it will take for your wife to break through, and how long we have to endure." Nanling pondered for a while and said, "Speaking of which, I have sealed all the houses, and the noise outside can't reach her. We can have a banquet outside. We can go to the house opposite, but I'm afraid it's too far and it's not convenient to take care of it nearby." Xin and others looked at the small house on the other side of the river. This distance is just a matter of raising their legs for them, but it's too far for Nanling. Xin couldn't help but sigh. "You really cherish your wife. She will be very pleased to know." Nanling didn't comment on this. After all, Moyamo's temper would definitely give him a cold-eye dart if he heard it. He changed the subject and said, "In this case, why don't we have a barbecue party here? Barbecue is also very good for drinking." Everyone responded in agreement. However, someone raised a doubt, that is, they didn't have a barbecue stove. This was not a problem for Nanling. He first used the branches he picked up from the back mountain to set up the meat to be grilled. Then, he had an idea and brought his own wingsuit over. He set up the wingsuit directly in front of him, and then operated it at the lowest power, so that it floated in front of him. Then he tried the high-temperature ions ejected from the 2 rows of jets of the wingsuit, and then summoned a gust of wind to circle around the high-temperature particles, which turned into a scorching wind, and then wrapped the scorching wind around the grilled meat and swirled. Speaking of which, he suddenly got it. Because he also has a fire talent in his blood, so he actually has a little understanding of fire spiritual power. So can he try to make limited use of this part of his talent? At least it should be no problem to develop a grill wind like this. He thought about it, and naturally his thoughts moved closer to the spiritual formation he had recently learned. His own spiritual power is all wind attribute, and it is obviously impossible to evolve into fire spiritual power so easily. So why can't we use the spirit A to gather the fire spirit power, and then use the mind to control it? No, if we want to control it, we can even have the intelligence core, which will be even simpler. So the question now is how to build a spirit array that can gather the fire spirit power in the simplest way. His thoughts drifted away. Chapter 205 Finger Sealed Spiritual Array. Nanling was able to make so many good brothers in such a short time. Although this was related to his excellent craftsmanship, the more important thing was that he was very good at observing words and expressions. He could directly judge whether the other party was willing to continue the topic and whether he was satisfied with something through the emotional spectrum. Therefore, everyone who got along with him felt like being bathed in spring breeze, as if everything Nanling did could touch their hearts. But if it was before today, everyone and Nanling were still drinking and eating together, then when they saw Nanling suddenly intertwined his 10 fingers into a unique gesture, and then quietly gathered fire spiritual power at his fingertips, everyone's expression changed. No one present was a simple person. They clearly saw that Nanling used his 10 fingers to form a spiritual formation, and then controlled the spiritual power of the attribute that he did not have. Nanling felt that this was right. If a person could only control one kind of spiritual power, it always felt a little wrong. He suddenly felt a little regretful. If he could understand this problem earlier, he would have to cultivate attributeless spiritual power. At this point, he could use all kinds of spiritual power at will. But later he thought that he was just daydreaming. If he cultivated attributeless spiritual power, he would have lost his bones long ago. At this time, he intertwined his hands into a seal, and the fire spiritual power condensed at his fingertips, and he sprayed it out in one breath. The next moment, the spiritual power of the warm wind technique sprayed out with this fire spiritual power as a line of fire, just like Nanling had learned the trick of jetting flames. But the temperature of this flame was completely under Nanling's control. Although he used wind spiritual power to control the temperature of the flame, it was obviously a little unstable, but it was definitely more than enough for grilling meat. Looking at Nanling in shock, he couldn't help asking, "Brother, where did you learn this trick?" Nanling paused for a moment, actually recalling the feeling just now, and then said, "I just had a sudden idea, and I don't know if others have thought of it." Everyone didn't know how to describe their feelings at this time. The red tree said confidently, "I can be sure that at least as far as I know, there is no such use as you have. With the 10 fingers as the foundation of the spiritual formation, aren't you afraid that your finger meridians can't bear it?" Nanling heard this and realized a key point, that is, his body was strengthened by the essence, so he could naturally withstand the tearing of the alien spiritual power. He pondered and said, "So, in order to successfully develop it, we have to match the method of body training." This train of thought suddenly opened up, and suddenly looked at the old brothers with an expectant look and said, "Brothers, I have an unwelcome request." Zhen patted his shoulder and said, "What do you want to do? Just say it, we old brothers will definitely do our best." At this time, Nanling was no longer a drinking buddy, but really admired his talent. Nanling said, "I just suddenly burst with inspiration, and I have a lot of ideas that I want to experiment with, so I want to ask you brothers for help." Everyone was stunned, and then they all agreed. Anyway, the meat was already roasted and the wine was already drunk, so they could eat while watching what Nanling could come up with. So Nanling's experiment began. It turned out that what he was experimenting with was not a spiritual array for himself, but for others. Because he was trying to turn the warm wind technique into a spiritual array. The first thing to experiment was of course whether the warm wind technique would have an enhanced effect on the fire technique. This was proven when the handsome middle-aged man Hongshu casually cast a fireball, which was suddenly enlarged 3 times by Nanling's warm wind technique and turned into a large fireball that could evaporate a layer of water vapor on the river surface. What he was going to do next was to try to develop a kind of finger gesture that Hongshu could master, so that he could cast the warm wind technique alone to increase the power of his fire technique. This matter attracted everyone's attention from the beginning, and they were all very interested in it. Most of the people present were cultivating fire spiritual power. If this could really work, it would probably be a big improvement for everyone. Nanling's ingenuity was very quick, especially when he used the method of entering the brain with essence to speed up his thinking. For him, it was easy to create a spiritual array for the warm wind technique, but it was difficult to let Thongshu and others use it. He had to consider the IQ of these people. No, it was to consider whether their bodies could bear it. So he did subtraction on the basis of his complete spiritual array, that is, constantly simplifying the spiritual array and reducing the power of the spiritual array, so that everyone could use finger gestures to build a spiritual array and perform the beggar version of the warm wind technique. The drinking buddies were actually fascinated. Because Nanling's thinking was too fast, if one idea failed, he would immediately come up with another idea. After one of Thongshu and others had some damage to the meridians in his hand after the experiment, he replaced another person to try. The progress of the creation of this spell was rapid. No one had ever thought that the development of a spell, especially a spell that was visible to the naked eye and had a great effect, would be so efficient. Moreover, the spiritual power of the warm wind technique was originally milder. After 2 rounds of swelling of the fingers of these masters, Nanling finally found the most suitable spell structure. Finally, when Thongshu crossed his fingers and gathered a ball of gentle wind spirit power at his fingertips, Nanling showed a relieved smile. Then Thongshu suddenly exhaled towards the ball of wind spirit power, and a flame spurted out of his mouth. The flame swept the wind spirit power, and it expanded when it saw the wind, and then in a moment it turned into a sea of fire that ignited the entire river surface. The scene was magnificent and magnificent. Success. A group of people cheered. Thongshu said excitedly, "Incredible, this almost increased the power of my fire technique by 50%. I can feel that if you hadn't simplified this spell, the effect would actually be better. Nanling nodded and said nothing, and then a light curtain appeared in front of him, and then he began to write a paper. At the same time, he said, "Brothers, I want to write this spell and authorize it for sale. Is that possible?" Thongshu said in surprise, "Why are you asking us about this?" Nanling said, "Because this spell was completed by everyone, I want to ask everyone's opinions." Thongshu said, "What's there to say? If you want to sell it, then sell it. We have benefited a lot from participating in this process." Everyone nodded. Nanling didn't say anything, but quickly finished the paper and filled in the names of other people as participants. According to the copyright rules, the main creator can get 70% of the profits, while the participants can get 30%. He just wanted to make money. After all, this kind of finger decision has no effect on him at all, so what's the point of asking for it? He submitted the paper and was about to drink and eat meat again. As a result, Zhen suddenly came up and asked, "They all have warm wind skills to match the fire skills, so do I have any way to match my thunder skills?" Nanling asked in surprise, "Brother, are you also good at thunder skills?" Zhen nodded. Nanling said with emotion, "My wife is also good at this. What a coincidence. Are you two relatives?" Zhen hesitated and said, "Maybe they are relatives. After all, the Linga clan is not a small clan on Chugye Star." The people from Thongshu next to him suddenly started to make a noise. "Ha, I didn't expect that Nanling's younger brother married a member of the clan of this old man's Zhen. That means I have to let my younger sister-in-law meet her brother." Their laughter was strange and evil. Nanling saw the joyful mood of everyone and couldn't help but guess that Zhen should be sent by the Linga family to assess him. Well, this is very likely. However, after so many days of getting along, Nanling can find that this Linga Zhen is actually very good-natured, quite simple and honest, and very likable. So Nanling said, "Ah, so this is really the relationship. I don't know if I, the son-in-law of the Linga family, make the old brother feel satisfied." Zhen immediately said vaguely, "Satisfied, satisfied." Everyone around was almost laughing to death, and Nanling's eyes were full of joyful moods. He couldn't help but laugh. After all, emotions are contagious. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 206. From Rich to Poor. Nanling also wanted to fulfill the request of Zhen, his brother-in-law. When it came to the spell that could enhance the thunder spell, Nanling immediately thought of the wind and cloud thunder that he had just mastered a while ago. But this is a medium spell with a high-level spell learning difficulty, and it is really difficult to simplify it. Nanling couldn't help but think about it, and then came up with a solution: making a spiritual tool. He developed the finger seal of the warm wind spell because this spell would definitely sell well in the ancient domain. But how many people would buy the finger seal of the wind and cloud thunder? So Nanling told him his idea. Anyway, there is a formula for making a spiritual tool. As long as the spell can be transformed into a spiritual ray, it is really not difficult to design a spiritual tool in this era. The wisdom core can be directly generated. After hearing Nanling's plan, Zhen was quite moved. At the time, he made an appointment to come over tomorrow at the materials and the furnace for making spiritual tools. So this day passed like this. Nanling slept well at night, but he didn't know that his warm wind fingerprint had quietly become something that subverted the academic world of the ancient domain after fermenting overnight. Because this is not part of the Academy's course content, it is completely published on the public platform and has passed the review. The entire ancient domain has gradually become lively because of this. It's not that no one has thought of similar methods, but most of these methods exist in the form of spiritual tools, just like the spiritual tools that Nanling is going to make for Zhen. But how expensive are spiritual tools, and how many ordinary fire magic practitioners are there in the entire ancient domain? Therefore, Nanling's warm wind fingerprint can actually be said to be a downgraded substitute for spiritual tools. No one could have thought of this method before, which is also related to the development of cultivation in this era. The cultivation of this era has been studied by the upper class from the very beginning. These upper-class nobles or big tyrants who have sufficient resources are always used to using tools and resources to help themselves achieve what they want. Therefore, if they want to improve the power of fire magic, they can naturally think of wind magic assistance, but what they finally implement is always tools such as spiritual tools. Then no one in the lower class can think of it. This is the limitation of vision. It is already very difficult for them to master the cultivation knowledge that suits their attributes throughout their lives, not to mention mastering the spiritual power knowledge of another attribute. This is like a hindrance to knowledge and understanding. People with resources can do the same or even better things directly with spiritual tools. But people without resources lack even this knowledge. Nanling's warm wind fingerprint actually builds a transition bridge between ordinary cultivators and resource masters. It cannot bring much improvement to the power controlled by the upper level, but it can help ordinary cultivators greatly improve their own power. After figuring out the target group of this warm wind fingerprint, it is understandable that there is such a commotion. Starting from midnight, the first copyright fee began to appear in Nanling's account. It is somewhat ridiculous that this warm wind fingerprint was rated as a primary spell level, because the warm wind spell is a primary spell. It seems that the AI system that evaluates the warm wind fingerprint has not been able to judge the true value of this spell, and the copyright price is naturally determined according to the price of the primary spell. The price for a single person to purchase the copyright of this spell is only 3,000 Lingzhu points. Nanling only received 2,000 Lingzhu points, and the remaining 1,000 was taken as platform fees. Nanling knew this a long time ago, and he didn't care. But this cheap price was snatched up all at once. People might have to think about whether the intermediate spells worth tens of thousands are worth it, but there is no need to consider the elementary spells worth only 3,000. The next morning, Nanling looked at his account and found that the amount in his account exceeded 2 million. Wow, thousands of copyrights were sold overnight. Nanling's face was flushed with excitement. He felt that he had never been so rich. What should he do with money? Pay back the money? No, it is impossible to pay back the money. If he pays back the money, will Mo still love him so much? So he has to spend the money. Where to spend it? He hesitated for a moment, and then immediately bought many spiritual weapon courses, and then bought a lot of materials to prepare for the high-end weapon-making attempt. He will not spend money recklessly, this is all necessary for self-improvement. Yes, it must be. I think Mo will be happy about this. After all, the feeling of a useless husband owing her money and a capable husband owing her money is different. It can be said that Nanling really took all aspects into consideration. He bought a lot of materials, and the only concern was that there was no equipment for forging. The price of these equipment is not cheap, and the price is tens of millions. Compared with this, Nanling felt that he was still a poor man. Fortunately, Zhen's arrival the next day solved this imminent worry for him. This guy actually drove a small warship directly over. He parked the small warship on the river, almost blocking the entire river. Then he opened the hatch and called Nanling. Come, there are equipment for you to make weapons on this ship. I borrowed it temporarily from the arsenal of the Qiling Legion for one day. Nanling felt very touched when he heard it. Brother Zhen is really capable. So he hurriedly got on the boat and started operating. According to Zhen's request, he made him a tailor-made axe with a wind-rolling cloud thunder spirit array. The axe was even a semi-finished product, and he only needed to arrange the spirit array. Of course, Nanling used all his skills to make a storm battle axe for Zhen. This axe can generate high-speed cyclones that rotate forward and reverse when it is swung, and then produce a strong static electricity effect. This already has a good killing power. And if Zhen combines it with his thunder magic, it can increase the killing power of thunder magic by more than 2 times. Good stuff, brother, you have a great craftsmanship. Zhen was satisfied. But he soon saw Nanling tossing other things. So he came over to take a look. He found that Nanling was melting a bracelet. Before she asked, Nanling had already said, "This is prepared for my wife. She has always been worried about my affairs. I am very grateful to her, so I made a little thing for her." Zhen heard this and watched calmly from the side, as if he was afraid to disturb Nanling's hard work. However, Nanling still had the leisure to chat with Zhen. He asked, "Brother, you are also from Ling's family. Can you tell me about my wife?" "No." Zhen asked in a deep voice, "What do you want to ask?" Nanling said, "I just want to ask, is there anyone in Mo's family? Should I choose a time to visit them?" Zhen laughed and said, "As for visiting, it depends on whether she is willing or not. As for her family, her mother passed away early, and there is only an old father left at home." Nanling paused for a moment, then said, "Then I have to think about what gift to prepare for my father-in-law." Zhen laughed immediately, then said, "I don't think you need to bother with those things. As long as you treat your wife well, he will be satisfied." Nanling said, "That won't work. Wouldn't that be neglecting my father-in-law?" "Brother, you have to think about it carefully." Zhen seemed to be troubled by this. Chapter 207. My wife comes out. Mo had been in seclusion for 10 days, breaking through the realm and consolidating her cultivation in one go. When she came out of seclusion, she happened to see the lotus flowers blooming in the river bend in front of her, which was very beautiful. She walked out of the room and saw a bracelet in the living room downstairs. She picked it up and saw the peculiarity of this bracelet. This reminded her of the day when Nanling held her hand and gave her the bracelet made of positive and negative cyclones on her wrist. She put it on her hand without hesitation. Although there was no word left beside, she was a little sure that this was a gift for her. Especially when it was worn on her wrist, it fit so well. Only the guy who always liked to stare at her every day could be so considerate, right? Mo smiled, then pushed the door and walked outside, and by the way, removed the black curtain that sealed the room, and then pushed the door out. Who knew that when the black curtain surrounding the room fell, the first thing she heard was a deafening Q-rock. Her brows were about to frown together. Well, it was enough for her to have a noisy fanny around her. Could it be that her Shionan was also someone who couldn't calm down? She had only been in seclusion for a few days, and she was making such a big noise. Then she pushed the door open and was frightened by the scene in front of her. She saw a small starship anchored in the river, and deafening music came from the deck of the starship. Then a group of people were eating barbecue and drinking, and they were swaying to the rhythm of the music. It was simply a group of demons dancing wildly and unbearable to watch. Mo glanced and found Nanling at the first time. She saw her Shionan was grilling meat with sweat on his forehead, and handed a skewer to others from time to time. Then she was angry. What's wrong with this group of people? Bullying her husband? No one loves him, right? Then she took a closer look at the other people on the deck of the starship. Her expression froze at the time, because she found that she knew all these people. Sure enough, the next moment she saw Xin, who was dancing the most happily in the crowd, and she felt that she was almost suffocated. At this moment, the music on the deck stopped suddenly. Mo turned her head unexpectedly and saw Nanling shouting in surprise. Sister Mo, you're out of isolation? Then all the masters on the ship suddenly became quiet. They looked at Mo, who was getting more and more pressured, and someone shouted, "The wind is strong and you can't help it." Then there was a flurry of activity. Nanling was pushed down from the deck by someone and almost fell into the river. Just before Mo was about to curse, the spaceship took off and ran away, as if it would be eaten alive by some prehistoric monster if it stayed. Nanling glanced at Mo and felt that the emotional aura on Mo was full of dark tones of destruction. She was really angry. He approached and said with a smile, "Did you succeed?" Mo did not say anything, and even did not bother to look at him. Nanling said again, "Do you like the gift I made for you?" Mo still did not move. Nanling saw that the emotional aura on Mo suddenly became lighter, and then a faint pink appeared. He immediately knew that his strategy was right. Then he continued, "Don't look at Brother Xin and his men making a fuss. In fact, they brought me a lot of good refining materials to practice with, and they also tried their best to steal the military furnace for me to use. They also," he paused, because he found that Mo's emotions suddenly became very chaotic, as if her heart was in turmoil. So Nanling didn't talk more about this topic, and immediately turned to another aspect and said, "Mo, come and see, the lotus flowers I planted are blooming, and the vegetables I planted in the back mountain are also edible. Let's eat what I planted tonight." Mo really didn't want to talk about those people anymore, so she nodded and said, "Okay." Then she turned around and went into the house in a panic. She seemed to be running away. Nanling glanced at her back and found it quite funny. He thought that Mo was shy. After all, he could guess that Xin must have brought all subordinates of Yi Chen in the Qiling Legion, and they should be familiar with Mo. He defined Mo's reaction as shy, and then further angry out of shame. So the response was very simple, just don't mention it, otherwise both sides would be embarrassed. As expected, nothing else happened that day. Mo was very quiet and even commented on Nanling's craftsmanship. But he didn't mention the group of people he saw during the day. Nanling asked, "Now that you've come out of seclusion, what's next?" Mo said, "Of course, I should study the spells that are suitable for my current realm. But in fact, it's just practicing what I knew before from a different angle. It won't take much time. How about you? How have your studies been recently?" Nanling said with emotion, "Study, I have completed the graduation project of the Cultivation Academy, and then the Equipment Manufacturing Academy sent me a message 2 days ago saying that they wanted me to take part in the assessments of several of their courses." Mo laughed and said, "Then you're better than me. It took me 2 years to complete the courses of 3 academies. And you can graduate from 2 academies in just half a month." Nanling shook his head and said, "What's the point of talking about being awesome? The Cultivation Academy is just a place for people to get by. The old professor couldn't stand it when I just summarized some of my daily application experiences. The same goes for the Equipment Manufacturing Academy. You can just rely on your daily accumulation to learn by yourself. You don't need to take any classes at all." That's all he could say. He never considered how much benefit his control and perception of spiritual power and wind spiritual power brought to this. Others may need to practice repeatedly to learn these, and even need teachers to explain the tricks and guide the key points before they can master the production of a spiritual tool. But what about him? He only needs to follow his own feelings to naturally know which places are the key points and how to deal with those key difficulties. For Nanling, the cultivators of this era have put a lot of effort into studying arts, and have touched on methods but not much. The most important thing is that they don't know what Tao is. Nanling himself doesn't know, but he knows the existence of Tao, and he knows that practicing methods should be above practicing arts, and Tao is the best. This is the difference in thinking and cognition, which is the key to his gradual differentiation. Mo didn't think there was anything unusual about Nanling's performance. Because she and Nanling have been together for quite a while, she has taught Nanling a lot of things about making instruments, and the two of them have discussed the mysteries of cultivation together. So she didn't think it was surprising that Nanling could perform like this. But she still warned, "You can't underestimate the Chugyu Academy just because you think it's easy. In fact, there are still many important things worth learning in the Chugyu Academy." Nanling nodded and said, "Yes, I will choose the Fighting Academy's database next." Chapter 208. The Mastermind Exposed. 2 days passed like this, and Nanling liked the days of appearing in the kitchen together every morning to prepare food, doing their own things during the day, and occasionally going out for a walk after dinner. This feeling of peace and quiet intoxicated him, and even made him feel like he didn't want to guess about things like cultivation anymore. For the first time in this life, he felt the happiness of life. However, at dinner that day, Mo took 2 bites of the food and suddenly asked with a hint of meaning, "I have successfully formed the elixir, can you let Fana come back?" Good guy, why did he say that as if Nanling was the mastermind behind that kidnapping of Fana? Nanling blinked and said, "Uncle wants to find her for special training, what does this have to do with me?" Mo rubbed his head in annoyance and said, "Don't think I don't know whose style that kind of talk is. Didn't you help Fana deal with me like this in the past?" Nanling immediately retorted, "Where is it?" Then he was silent for a while, as if there really was, just when Fanny wanted to raise a pet. I didn't expect Mo to see through it at a glance, she is really a smart girl. Mo said, "Please be kind." I guess Fanny is secretly wiping tears now. Nanling laughed dryly and said, "Is it that exaggerated?" However, before he could continue to say anything, Gye Chen had already sent him a message. "I heard that Mo has been released from confinement." Nanling immediately replied, "Yes, just released from confinement, and is still adapting to her situation these 2 days." Gye Chen seemed to be relieved and said, "Then can I let Fana come back?" Nanling. He just couldn't understand why he really seemed to be the mastermind behind the imprisonment of Fana's boss. So he said, "Uncle Gye, when will Fana come back?" "That depends on how well you train her." Gye Chen. "I think if the special training continues, I should get a mechanical heart. So, she can come back, right?" Oh my goodness. It was clearly a text message, but why did Nanling see a sense of humility that was really unbearable from it? How much did Fana get disliked by her own father? You know, this father is someone who is willing to raise an army for his daughter and even lose all his power. This matter, Nanling sighed, and then said, "Okay, she can come back." Gye Chen didn't say anything. But Mo looked up in surprise after a moment and said, "Fana just sent a message that her special training can be completed, and she is cheering for me." And then, Nanling saw Fana's voice immediately appear in the recently established Zhuoxia army group. "Brothers and sisters, Fana is back. Are you ready to continue fighting with me?" Just one sentence, the feeling of peace and tranquility was completely gone. Mo smiled, then looked at Nanling and said, "You still say that you are not the mastermind, look at Fana's frustration." Very good, this time Nanling felt that he could no longer clear himself. He said helplessly, "I said this is a coincidence, do you believe it?" Mo showed a rare gentle smile on her face and said, "I believe it." Nanling couldn't hold it anymore. What's the difference between this and yes, you're right? At this time, Mo stood up and said, "Let's go to the opposite room to clean up. Fana can't wait to come over." Nanling asked helplessly, "She can't even stand staying one more night in her own house?" Mo said, She doesn't like the feeling of being with Master Gichen. She always feels that the master has to control her in everything. Nanling felt that this father and daughter must be enemies in the previous life. Isn't this too much to torture each other? At this time, Gichen sent a message. Fana must go to your place now and take good care of her for me. Do you need anything over there? If you need anything, I will ask Thongshu to send it to you. Nanling was quite moved when he heard this. What has he become between this father and daughter? He said, don't worry, Mo and I are cleaning up her house now. There is nothing missing here. Nanling laughed. It was a laugh of showing off. All right, let's all come to him, right? Not long after, they heard Fana's voice shouting from outside the house. Mo, Shonen, I'm here to join you. She fell directly from the sky. There was a flying car in the sky, running around like a headless fly. The AI didn't expect that someone would jump out of the car, and was directly screwed. But she wouldn't fall directly. After all, she was a Jindan cultivator. She could use her spiritual power to control herself to float in the air. Nanling hurriedly called out, Boss Fanny, come down quickly, you don't have a special flying license, what if you get caught? Fanny was still pretending, and then she heard this. Her momentum froze on the spot, and then she came down and said to Nanling in an unfriendly way, what do you know? I'm a noble Jindan cultivator. I have the right to fly on this Chugyu star. Mo said suddenly. But as far as I know, the flying rights of Jindan cultivators are very limited. The speed limit is only within 100 kilometers per hour, and a flight plan must be submitted to the traffic control center for each flight. When Nanling heard it, he immediately said, isn't this the same as an ordinary internal flight certificate? Mo said, that's natural. After all, Jindan cultivators can protect themselves during high-speed flight, but the laws of Chugyu Star must be responsible for the safety of everyone's life. So this decree of slowing down Jindan came into being. After hearing this, Fana realized that there were so many details, and said dissatisfiedly, why are there so many things? How did this decree pass? Won't those Jindan cultivators object? Mo said again, maybe for Jindan cultivators, it only takes a little time to take a special flight certificate. Fana froze on the spot. She looked at Mo suspiciously, and then her eyes moved back and forth between Mo and Nanling. She said, I always feel that you guys just teamed up to bully me. Nanling immediately denied it 3 times. You think too much, how could it be possible? It's impossible. Mo directly changed the subject. Speaking of which, the internal competition of Chugyu Academy is about to begin. Should we gather all the teams? As expected, Fana's attention was immediately diverted. She said happily, yes, I've been waiting for this. Brothers and sisters, everyone log in. The latter sentence was shouted in the Shuoxia Legion group. Nanling knew it was like this, and the days of peace and quiet were gone forever. He sighed and said, okay, go to the number. Mo glanced at Fanny, who had sweat on her forehead after coming in a hurry, and wiped her sweat with a tissue and said, have you had dinner? Fanny said disapprovingly, not yet. Mo hurriedly said, then I'll go make you a bowl of noodles. There is some extra beef made by Shionan in the kitchen, just right for you to cook. Nanling had already stood up and said, you stay with her, I'll do it. Fanny hurriedly shouted, don't forget to go to the number. Nanling said, don't worry, I know. Fanny immediately threw herself into Mo's arms affectionately and giggled, and he didn't know what she was funny about. At this time, Nanling was speechless because of a thought that suddenly popped up in his mind. Why did he feel that Fanny was the daughter he and Mo raised? Although it was definitely not, it really felt like it. Chapter 209. The deep meaning of the competition system. The Galaxy Immortals school competition soon entered the preliminary stage. Previously, the competition system and the rules of the finals were spread all over the world, and now at the official announcement of the preliminary stage of the Galaxy Immortals, the selection mechanism was finally announced. There are 3 places for the Immortal Legion in the Ancient Domain. These 3 Immortal Legions will come from the winning teams selected from the Chugyu Academy, the winning teams selected from the fleets of the Ancient Domain, and finally the winning teams of the entire Ancient Domain civil competition. These 3 selection directions are very interesting, almost to catch all the talents in this area in the entire Ancient Domain. We only need to sign up for the school selection, right? After all, even Aunt Liji works in the Taikuno 5 space station. According to the rules of the school selection system, she can participate. Nanling said very firmly. However, at this time, Fana denied it more firmly. No, we want to sign up for the civil selection and the school selection together. Nanling was stagnant at the time. This was the thing he least wanted to see. Because there are too many participating teams in the ancient domain civil selection competition, it will take a lot of time to go through many rounds of screening. He quickly advised, the competition time for both sides is the same, what if there is a conflict? Fana said indifferently, then let's compete in the academy first, and then in the global selection competition. Anyway, the preliminary round of the global selection competition is a points system, so it doesn't matter if a few games are dropped. And the academy competition is at most one game every night. She said with regret, it's a pity that the fleet can't intervene, otherwise I would like to sign up there too. What can Nanling say now? He can only sigh, and then change his mind and say, this is good, it can cultivate our cooperation, tacit understanding and tactical ability. Speaking of which, does this game allow dual opening? After these words came out, even Thongship, who was proud and reserved and didn't say a word, couldn't hold it anymore. Li Ji has already said, you can open 2 games at the same time, but because the computing power of the superbrain or the intelligent core cannot be used in this game, opening 2 games at the same time will test our own human brain's thinking ability. Nanling said, that's even simpler, we don't have to give up every game. If there is a conflict in the game, then we will naturally give priority to the school, and the global selection will be. Nanling pondered for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up and looked at his nephew Thongshi and said, you will be the one to withstand the pressure in the early stage. Nanling really came up with this trick of opening 2 games at the same time. Thongshi's defensive organization ability is indeed very strong and very safe. At the time, he only needs to focus on organizing the defense and wait for others to quickly end the battle of the Chugyu Academy. Upon hearing this, Fana's eyes immediately lit up, looking at Nanling and praising him. It has to be you. Thongshi looked at Nanling with dissatisfaction again. In his opinion, this kind of blind fawning approach is really unbearable. But who is Nanling? At the time, he noticed that the mood of nephew Thongshi was not right, and he seemed very resistant, so he immediately said, it's just for fun anyway. It doesn't matter if you let it go if it doesn't work out. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Fana hurriedly said, yes, that's right, our main thing is to protect Chugyu Academy. Thongshi's face looked better, but he said seriously, to be honest, I suggest that we can still prioritize when appropriate, and my opinion is that in the end we should focus on the selection within the academy, and we should give up the global selection events when appropriate. Nanling looked at Thongship, then nodded and said, this is a good suggestion, I agree. Thongship glanced at Nanling unexpectedly, and finally felt a little good about this flattering villain. After all, Nanling was still rational. Fana said somewhat unwillingly, why can't we have both? Nanling said, to be honest, it's not that we can't have both, but if we do that, we will spend too much time on pre-war preparations. Fanny was puzzled. Pre-war preparations? In her concept, isn't this game meant to be played happily right from the start? Upon hearing this, Nanling said unhappily, Boss Fanny, this is an important competition that determines whether you can leave Chugyu Star. Is it really okay for you to have such a casual attitude? Hurry up, be nervous. Fanny was stunned by what Nanling said, and then she really felt that she should be more nervous. Nanling added, you see, in order to ensure the smooth progress of each round, we need to investigate the routines and tactics they are good at, as well as the division of labor among different people before the battle. In this way, we can analyze a lot of things from the selection of their chief general at the beginning, and then we can target them to ensure tactical victory first. Fanny felt numb after hearing this, and she said, it's so troublesome. Nanling continued, of course, as for giving up that global trials in the end, it's because I noticed a competition system. At this moment, Mo suddenly raised his eyes, and a series of data images flashed in the victorious body inside, and then he said, you mean, this competition doesn't restrict the flow of people? Li Ji also nodded and said, I noticed it too. Although there is no rule that explicitly states it, they also have no order to lock the number of Legion members. In other words, this selection is very likely to allow each team to add, subtract, and replace personnel at will during the game. Thongshi suddenly understood after hearing this. He looked at Nanling, Mo and Li Ji in front of him and realized that these 3 people were very rare intelligence analysis talents. This was also his shortcoming. This discovery made him quite depressed, because he found that his talent was probably not so prominent in this team. Fanny blinked and said, in this case, won't the enemies we encounter in the future become stronger and stronger? Li Ji nodded and said, yes, the outstanding people in the eliminated team will be invited by the winner and then join the other team. and each team will continue to learn from each other's strengths and weaknesses, and will become more and more comprehensive and powerful. She paused for a moment when she said this. However, Fanny seemed to understand this naturally. She said firmly, "No one in our team will be replaced." At this time, Thongchi actually felt respected, just like Li Ji. He said, "But that is unwise. If the young lady wants to achieve her goal, she will have to replace the team with a better one sooner or later." Fanny shook her head and said, "Replace whom?" "Replace myself. Each of you is so powerful and can make achievements in different fields. Unlike me, who can only charge into battle." As she spoke, she felt lost. Upon seeing this, Nanling suddenly looked at Mo and said, "Then what we should pay attention to next is to cultivate Boss Fanny's ability in this area." Mo nodded knowingly and said, "If you can charge into battle to the extreme, or integrate everyone's strength to break through the enemy's formation, then this is also a very strong ability. Fanny, you can do it." Fanny nodded with emotion, and then said to everyone, "Don't get me wrong, I want to participate in this competition not for my own fun, but to be able to let our Zhuoxia set sail again. If it's not you, not these people, on the Zhuoxia that sets sail, then what's the point?" It has to be said that Fanny is still very good when she is sincere and serious. Chapter 210. The Burning Valkyrie. The ancient domain trials of Galaxy Fairy Guest started soon, but the battle on that day was quite speechless. Fanny just approached the opponent and harassed him twice, and he was at a loss and couldn't make any progress. In the end, he even raised the white flag and surrendered. This overly simple game made Fanny herself unable to play, which was equivalent to her defeating the opponent alone. Well, this global trials is really boring. It seems that any team can sign up for the competition. Fanny said a little bored afterwards. Nanling said, "Wouldn't it be a good opportunity for everyone to practice?" He didn't have any prejudice. Fanny immediately had an idea when she heard it. She said, "Then let Mo come to play this global trials with me on weekdays. Others can do what they should do. Thongship, you don't have to be embarrassed. I will be the main player in this global trials." Fanny has already made up her mind. She is determined to exercise her abilities in certain aspects. In this way, Nanling was happy to be free. While thinking about the various courses and knowledge in the Fighting Academy, he was thinking about the problems behind the Galaxy Immortal Guest. There must be some big problems behind the Galaxy Immortal Guest. The first is the problem of the game scene. Which game scene is so unchanging now? But it just doesn't change. To be honest, if its operating company had not invested huge resources to promote and hold this competition, and even gave many precious rewards, such inducement would not be able to stir up such a high heat. And what's interesting is that all major forces seem to be willing to cooperate with them to do this. It seems that the Xingcan pioneers behind the Galaxy Immortal Guest really have a lot of faith. Secondly, if Nanling's analysis of this competition system is not wrong, then the more outstanding people gather in this competition, the more it goes on. This seems to be intentional. Then it is conceivable that when the winning team appears, the talent gathered in this team must be the top batch in the entire human star field. What does the brilliant pioneer want to gather such a team for? There must be a purpose. It's just that it's hard to figure out what this plot is about. Nanling didn't care. He just tried various tactics in the selection competition of the Academy. Facts have proved that the most suitable tactic for their team is for him to start first, and then immediately send Li Ji out. This is definitely an unexpected route. But this is the reality, especially when Li Ji also passed the special flight certificate with her own ability. Her ability was fully exerted. She has a reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance ability similar to a talent, and can always find the location of the local base with clues or the most flexible prediction. And when she finds the enemy base, the first thing to do is to determine the opponent's tactics and start the first wave of harassment. The special flight certificate means that her flying ability has reached the level of an ace pilot to some extent, so she can advance and retreat calmly. And according to Nanling's instructions, she can constantly forge traces to mislead the local judgment of the location of the Zhuoxia Legion base. In this way, Nanling can see the local tactical configuration at a glance, and Li Ji's misleading operation is to buy enough time for the development of his own base. In this case, Nanling also has enough time to accumulate strength, and then summon Fanny to command the frontal battle. That's right, he gave all the combat power to Fanny to command at all costs, and then the others focused on operations. Nanling wanted to stimulate Fanny's combat talent. She must have this talent, otherwise she would not go far if she only relied on personal bravery. Facts have proved that his judgment is correct. From the beginning, she had the upper hand in small-scale group battles, and then the scale of the battle became larger and larger. Fan and I gradually showed a very special talent. That is, she can keenly perceive the weak points or weaknesses of the enemy's formation in the frontline battle. Her command and combat can always cut the enemy formation like a scalpel, making it difficult for the opponent to separate the head and tail. This ability alone is already an unparalleled choice for generals on the ancient cold weapon battlefield. But this is far from enough for Fan and I. Because the battlefield of this era is not just about charging into battle, logistics, support, and operations are all very important. The larger the scale of the battlefield, the more important the operations are. Fanny is not good at operations, so she must make greater achievements in the front battlefield and front-line command. Once Fanny's ability to command the front line is trained, the Juxia Legion will be truly free of shortcomings. In other words, they can truly perform their duties. Nanling and Mo's reconnaissance, harassment, and comprehensive operations are undoubtedly the strongest and most comprehensive, while Liji is able to conduct reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, harassment, and rear operations, and is also powerful. The next thing, she also has an outstanding ability, that is, the pressure-resistant operation in the defensive state. Although this ability partially overlaps with Nanling, it is still very precious. Obviously, in this team, when 4 people can operate, Fanny doesn't care whether she can operate or not. She just needs to be able to do the best in the battle. She did so. A month later, once there was a suitable opponent, Nanling would deliberately create various suitable scene materials for Fanny to train. Now Fanny's ability has also made great progress compared to the past. The most notable point is that she can command properly in medium-sized battles, and use her command to divide the battlefield like a butcher cutting a cow. She has passed the time when she charged into battle to find loopholes, and can create loopholes through battle command, thereby continuously accumulating advantages. Even so, the Juxia army has become famous in this month. Since this is a competition that everyone pays attention to, it naturally has the function of creating stars. The selection competition of the entire ancient domain is different from the fleet and college selection competitions. It is completely broadcast live to the outside world and is a big show for the whole people to celebrate. Even in this case, the Juxia army's undefeated record and the 5 members with distinct characteristics have become the objects of pursuit by many people. Because of Fanny's explosive offensive ability and the long red hair brought by her Gi family origin, she is nicknamed the Valkyrie with burning hair. And Mo is good at information warfare and electronic interference warfare. The battlefield where she is always has patches of aurora due to the use of strong magnetic fields, so she is called the Aurora Goddess. Liji has many opportunities to appear, and her divinely assisted reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance capabilities are deeply rooted in people's hearts, so she is called the Falcon. Thongchi is simple, because whenever he appears, he is organizing fortifications, and no matter how fierce the opponent's attack is, he can firmly resist it, so he is called the Silent Iron Wall. It is worth mentioning that Nanling's title is Ghost Strategist. Because everyone gradually discovered that all the tactical strategies of the Juxia Legion came from the hands of this Ghost Strategist, and he often even came up with some eye-catching new tactics. His military strategy is truly commendable. Of course, Nanling himself doesn't care about this, he just secretly laughs at Fanny's nickname Burning Hair Valkyrie in his heart. After all, this is a bit too erotic. P.S. I'll use the last free time before the job transfer to add one more chapter. Chapter 211 Live Broadcast Accident. Miss King Fei is the most famous and popular singer in the entire ancient domain. Her voice is sometimes ethereal and charming, and sometimes clear and magnificent. She can be called a pillar singer with a full range of voices. Miss King Fei is only in her early 20s this year, which is the most beautiful age. In fact, to be honest, it is not possible for singers of this era to become famous early. It takes enough time to accumulate enough time to sing the kind of rich taste that the people of the ancient domain like the most, like mellow wine. And the reason why Miss King Fei can be so popular at such a young age is also obvious. Because her surname is Gu, she is the eldest daughter of a direct lineage of the Gi family in the ancient domain. This identity is somewhat similar to Fanny, but in fact, the identity of Gi King Fei is much more noble than that of Gi Fan. Although the Gi Chen branch has produced a fairy king who is quite noble, he actually does not control the core resources of the ancient domain. If not, why would the ancient fairy king set up a longevity association to do his own things? Concubine Gi King is different. The branch he belongs to has always controlled the core interests of the Gi family, and can be regarded as the most legitimate branch of the legitimate branch. As for her choice to show her face and become a singer with a noble status, in fact, there is no lack of consideration from the top management of the Gi family. They launched the most outstanding legitimate daughter to become a national idol, which is a very important thing for the Gi family to control the hearts of the people in the ancient domain. At this time, such a noble lady was invited by the organizer of the Galaxy Immortal Guest Selection to enter the virtual studio to explain a highly anticipated battle. These are two very famous legions in the ancient domain Galaxy Immortal Guest Selection, one named Shanho and the other named Zhuoxia. Shanho is a professional team. In this era, professional game players are very popular. After all, there are empty people who want to experience glory in the virtual world. And Shanho is such a team composed of professional players, and they also have many fans of their own. In comparison, Zhuoxia is not so famous. It's just that there are always some eye-catching tactics in the Battle of Zhuoxia, which makes this team more and more popular, and it is a newcomer in popularity in traffic. And tonight's battle is also that first round of the elimination match. The battle between Shanho and Zhuoxia attracted many people's attention. It can be regarded as a collision between two popular teams. The operating company wanted to stir up this heat thoroughly, so it called the real little princess of the Gi family, the peerless singer Gi Qingfei. Miss Qingfei showed full vitality and affinity, and her energetic look was really likable. At the same time, because of her good education, she can use the most elegant words to introduce the two teams, which soon made the number of people watching this live broadcast rise steadily. At this time, Nanling and others were also watching Miss Qingfei's live broadcast. He was quite surprised and said, "She looks really like Fan." It is true that they are very similar. They both have long red hair and look full of energy. Even their faces are somewhat similar. People believe that they're sisters. When Fan heard this, she snorted coldly and said, "Don't compare me with that little bitch. She's just pretending to be like that in front of people. You'll never know how bad she is behind the scenes. Willful, selfish, lawless, she has never been a good girl." Nanling heard this, glanced at Fan quickly and then quickly lowered her head. In comparison, Mo acted much more naturally, she just pretended not to hear. Others, even Thongsha showed a weird expression. Li Ji said nonchalantly, "But you were a good girl." Fanny's expression was a little strange. She felt that Li Ji seemed to have something wrong with her words, but was she praising her? Nanling's stomach hurt a little. Willful, selfish, lawless, is this how Fanny describes herself? Fortunately, at this time, Mom spoke up. "Don't worry about this kind of thing. According to what we agreed before, let Thongsha hold on here first. Let's have the college battle first. If there is a risk in the college battle, or if we can't hold on here, Thongsha, just give up and come to participate in the college battle." After all, the college battle has entered the quarterfinals of the 16-2-8, and the global trials outside have just started the elimination round. In Mo's words, there was not much concern for the initial selection. After all, the global trials of the ancient domain were really just a tactical exercise in her mind. It would be better if she could pass it, but it would not be a pity if she couldn't. The college elimination round was the key. Speaking of it, Chiugi College can be said to have gathered the top elite talents of the entire ancient domain, and the college battle should be more difficult. But according to the reasons given by Nanlin, the college battle is less difficult. Don't think that Chiugi College, which gathers the young elites, is more difficult than the global trials. There are millions of participants in the global selection competition. Although the quality is mixed, the team that can make it to the end must be the best of the best. Under the special competition system of Galaxy Fairy, the team members who are further along must be stronger and more comprehensive. More importantly, each team must have a large reserve echelon to deal with all situations. A small team like the Burning Cloud Legion, which has only 5 people, is the easiest target. In this regard, the Chiugyu Academy is undoubtedly much better. Most of the people here are well known. Ordinary people will go all out and do anything because of the high rewards of the Galaxy Fairy, but it is difficult for them to have such a situation. The teams here are often composed of the Burning Cloud Legion, a young master or a young lady, with their elite followers or friends. This kind of team loses, and its members are generally not recruited by other teams to appear in front of the Burning Cloud Legion again. Therefore, because of the conflict in schedule today, the 5 members of Zhuoxia decided to focus their main energy on the school battle and the global selection competition, even though it was a highly anticipated live broadcast, was still placed in the position where it could be abandoned at any time. So all the people watching the live broadcast encountered a very embarrassing scene. The professional team Xianhou and Zhuoxia played at bladder game. Thongship, the silent iron wall, was too cowardly. After setting up that defense line, he began to accumulate resources and increase the thickness and depth of the defense line. He had no intention of attacking at all. And the Xianhe was always attacking painfully. However, they took great efforts to capture a little distance, but found that the defensive facilities on both wings had become more. If they continued to attack, they would be surrounded by this defense line. They had no choice but to retreat a distance, and once they retreated, Thongsh's defense line would move forward again. It was like this. The spectators were extremely bored throughout the whole process. If it weren't for Miss King Fei's beauty, I'm afraid this scene would have been dispersed long ago. Miss King Fei's smile was stiff and her face was not good. She was almost at a loss for words, and she was even on the verge of being quite depressed. Finally, she became willful. Speaking of which, I don't know if the Zhuoxia Legion's behavior is considered a violation. After all, they opened two battlefields at the same time. As soon as she finished speaking, she actually switched to another screen in the live broadcast room, and said with a smirk, "I caught them. It turns out that they are fighting happily here." The director of the live broadcast room was instantly numb. This was an accident. But he couldn't do anything. The eldest lady of the Ge family in front of him was too willful. She cut the screen in without caring whether the school battle was suitable for broadcast. What else could he do at this time? He could only grit his teeth and hold on. Chapter 212 The Willful Miss. What you are seeing now is a big battle in the 16-2-8 elimination match of Chugyu Academy. The two sides in the Battle of Zhuoxia, who we are very familiar with, and the Lanaikyo Corps, which is well known in Chugyu Academy. You can see that they have reached the stage of strategic stalemate at this time, but it is completely different from the stalemate just now where one side defended and the other side held on. The battle here is intertwined and the battle is very exciting. The Zhuoxia Corps is really a group of cunning guys, especially their corps commander Gyufani, who was even more arrogant and conceited. He actually played this trick even though he knew it was a live broadcast for the public. Miss King Fei couldn't help but start complaining. It seemed that she was really resentful. And the people watching the battle in the entire live broadcast room laughed at you when they heard it. They thought that this feeling of beautiful girls being coquettish was really interesting. But soon everyone fell silent. Because they focused their attention on the battlefield. This battlefield, how to say it, can be said to be completely different from the previous battlefield. Although the previous battlefield had also developed to the later stage, because it was just a simple attack on one side and defense on the other, people could not see much excitement. What appeared in front of them now is a real large-scale battle. The battlefield situation of advancing and retreating was suffocating. It seemed that if you accidentally missed any part, you would miss a wonderful confrontation. This scene even stunned Miss King Fei herself. She exclaimed, "The Chugyu Academy is worthy of being the highest academy in my ancient domain. The intensity of this game is probably no worse than any large-scale battle in history. I think everyone must be very curious about what kind of mental state both sides will have in this battle. Next, we will use some technical means to open the internal audio tracks of the combat channels of both sides, so that everyone can experience the tension and oppression of this high-end game." Miss King Fei made another very willful and excessive decision. She directly announced the voice information of the two sides. You must know that this involves many tactical contents of both sides. If it is leaked like this, it will probably cause great trouble to both sides. But Miss King Fei did it, without caring about the consequences of doing so. This kind of thing made everyone feel nervous and excited. The nervousness was that they were afraid that they would be manipulated in the same way during the battle, which would very likely reveal their tactical thinking and cause trouble for their team's subsequent battles. But the excitement, this way, the live broadcast really became very interesting. It was just a little strange that the intense and fierce voices were all from the audio frequency of Lanaikyo, while Zhuoxia was silent. Miss King Fei immediately divided the audio tracks for both sides, and the result was really like that. The voice communication on the side of Lanaikyo was extremely intense. "Be careful, Fanny is leading the team again. Hold on, you must hold on, don't let her break through our formation. Left wing, why hasn't there been any progress on the left wing? Is Lingyama so difficult to fight? Keep increasing the pressure, both of you go together. You must put enough pressure on Lingyama and don't let her withdraw. Where is the assault team? How are your preparations going? When can we get close to the opponent's base? Hurry, 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 all the troops have been pressed up, we can't maintain this intensity for too long, these two women are too fierce." After listening to this audio track, everyone realized that the battlefield that seemed evenly matched was actually maintained by Lanikaio, and they were obviously risking everything and plotting a counterattack. This immediately became exciting, and everyone began to pay attention to the audio track on the side of the Juoxia Legion, wanting to hear any good news from this side. Then, out of the blue, the soundtrack called Falcon sounded first. They sent people to approach the base, and I found their traces. The very calm voice brought great psychological pressure to all the spectators. Because it means that Lanikaio's desperate gangle is nowhere to be hidden in the eyes of Juoxia Falcon. This anti-reconnaissance ability is really too strong, especially since this Falcon is still in charge of logistics deployment at this time. Nanlin, the guy nicknamed Ghost Strategy on the internet, replied, "Then this battle can be over. As long as the front line maintains pressure, we can catch this sneak attack team in the rear." Falcon made a prompt decision and said, "Small problem, the logistics authority is left to you, I'll be back soon." Then everyone saw the Juoxia base, where Falcon led a special combat machine to leave. Unexpectedly, he chose to take the initiative to attack without waiting for the other party to come to the door. Everyone held their breath and thought that Juoxia would carry out a series of intense deployments next. But what they waited for was the collapse of the orchid leaf grass on the front battlefield without any fuss. The front where the greatest military strength of the orchid leaf grass was gathered was the battlefield where Fanny was. She directly broke through the opponent's frontal defense with a weak force, causing the opponent to collapse directly. The consequence was that the left wing where Mo was located launched a counterattack, and the offensive was like a tide. However, there was not much movement on the right-wing battlefield of Juoxia, and it was still in a state of defense. This was the defense organized by Nanling, and he had too many things to take care of, so there was no way to promote the offensive together. But even so, the opponent was already at complete defeat. But the opponent was still barely holding on, as if all hopes were placed on the assault team. Everyone felt sad, and of course they knew that the assault would be fruitless. At this time, Fanny, the strange woman nicknamed the Valkyrie with burning hair on the internet, said, "How about we give it a break?" Nanling asked in astonishment, "Why is that?" "Thongchi must be having a hard time holding on." Fanny said calmly, "I feel happy just thinking about that scene. Yu Qingfei must be very bored now." Ha ha ha. Crack. Yu Qingfei gritted her teeth and almost broke them. She felt that she was careless. She didn't expect that Fanny, a stupid woman, would say such a thing in public. Although this matter was her fault, who made her so willful to open the soundtrack? But she would not blame others, she would only blame Fanny. At this moment, Mo, nicknamed Aurora Goddess, said lightly, "This is not good. After all, she is a sister of your clan." "If she loses face," Fanny continued, "that will be very interesting." Yu Qingfei wanted to crawl to Fanny along the network cable and tear the mouth of this bastard sister apart. Fortunately, Nanling changed the subject at this time. "It's better to end it quickly. I still have to prepare a midnight snack for my beloved Mo." Everyone was stunned, and their mood became weird. "Is this flirting?" However, Mo said, "No, I have eaten the midnight snacks you made every day recently. I have gained 2 kilograms. This felt a little wrong." It went from flirting to dog food, and forced people's mouths. Fanny laughed and said, "What are you afraid of? Eating more is just right for physical training. I want to eat big elbows." She ordered the dishes herself. Nanling nodded and said, "Okay, I'll let the robot at home prepare it first." "Well, my computing power is not needed here for the time being, right?" Fanny said impatiently, Go, they can't make any waves here anymore." This conversation, full of a strong sense of life, really made all the people watching the live broadcast feel a strong sense of unreality. Obviously, this is a tense and fierce battlefield, but they have never felt any tension from the people in Juoxia. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 213, Who is Better? The 16-2-8 elimination match of Chugyu Academy soon came to an end, and Juoxia won without any surprise. Juoxia was able to drag it to the end, but in fact, she did not let the opponent, Lanikaio, be strong enough, and Juoxia was missing a member after all. In this case, she could only drag it to the late stage, so that the operational capabilities of Nanling, Lei Ji, and Mo could be superimposed and each could play its full role. In addition, Fanny's strong suppression on the front battlefield overcame the disadvantage in numbers. After the victory, they hurriedly changed the venue. However, during this transition, Nanling and others suddenly received an emergency notice from the official at the competition. Because the synchronous audio track is turned on during the live broadcast, all your conversations during the live broadcast will be broadcast. Please be careful with your words. Everyone looked at each other in the preparation space. But soon they were summoned to another battlefield by Thongshi in one breath. Thongshi said with a tired face, "I can't hold on any longer." He was indeed very hard. One person had to resist the computing power of 5 people. This was indeed a manifestation of personal ability. However, he thought he would hear Fanny's energetic voice, but he saw her expression was very strange. Nanling felt that things might get out of control when he saw this, because he found that Fanny seemed to be getting more and more excited after hearing the official warning. So she calmly began to control the troops on the front line, and said faintly, "Guys, I heard that they invited the peerless singer King Fei to do the commentary for this live broadcast. It's really hard for her to let her do the commentary for my cousin who she dislikes the most." This way look was very unprofessional. Mo was a little nervous and winked at Fanny repeatedly, but when she saw Fanny's expression, she knew that she was going to lose control, and she quickly looked at Nanling again. And what about Nanling? At this time, he was calmly taking over the logistics affairs of the base. After receiving Mo's eyes, he sighed very tiredly. Why does he always take this kind of job? Nanling knew that Fanny was holding her breath at this moment, and with Fanny's willfulness, if she was allowed to release this breath wantonly, he suspected that he would hear Fanny's direct little bitch and such a low-class curse here, which would make the Give family's top management lose face. To be honest, he was really curious whether the Give family's top management was trembling at this moment. Nanling smiled lightly and said, "She is just a singing girl in the Kingping ship. Fanny, you are much greater than her, and you are no longer on the same level as her." Mo's eyes widened as if she saw a ghost. She winked at Nanling to let Nanling find a way to hold Fanny, but she didn't let him start to mock first. Fanny also opened her eyes wide. She wanted to mock, but now she was completely attracted by Nanling's words and wanted to listen to Nanling's words. In the live broadcast room outside, Miss King Fei's eyes were getting bigger and bigger. She didn't expect that she would hear such shocking remarks. The young lady who had been held in the palm of her hand since she was a child was probably pitted by her self-willed behavior this time. Now everyone wanted to hear what Nanling had to say. But the next moment, Nanling's words were speechless. He said, "Fanny, she is just a singer who used her voice to entertain people during the prosperous times. Maybe she can make a louder voice than you now, and there are more people supporting her than you. But you have to know that it's just like what we are doing and experiencing in this virtual game. If it really comes to a critical moment for the survival of mankind, how many enemies can you lead us to defeat? Or how many humans can the shelters and bases we build together protect?" Nanling seemed to be completely unaware that the live broadcast had opened the audio track. He said in a calm and powerful tone, "Fanny, you and her are not on the same track, so no matter what happened when you were young, she is not as good as you now. At least in my heart, she is far inferior to you." Fanny was so happy when she heard this, and she felt that Nanling had to be the one who could speak. Mo was numb. She felt that Nanling was pulling all the hatred from Fanny onto herself, which would be very troublesome in the future. However, Nanling was not aware of this at all. He felt that he was just a homebody and would not have any trouble if he did not go out. Could it be that those fans of Miss King Fei could crawl over along the network cable to mess with him? He said cheerfully, "Now, let's end this battle." Fanny and I really got motivated. She rushed to the front line with full energy and led her assault team to break up the enemy's formation like a machine. Her amazing personal combat ability played a huge role in this process, but the most excessive thing was that every time she swung her sword, she would shout loudly, "King Fei would not cut people like this. King Fei can't handle this. If King Fei encounters such an enemy, she would probably be scared silly, right?" And so on. King Fei really regretted turning on the audio track. She sent a message to the director frantically. "Turn off the audio track, did you hear?" The director said in embarrassment, "But Miss King Fei, we just received instructions from above, and there can be no more changes. Please don't embarrass us anymore, this competition can't become a joke." King Fei replied gloomily, "So you just watch me become a joke?" She gritted her teeth, especially with real hatred for a certain man who caused all this. But she couldn't change it, she could only cope with the broadcast, trying to make her voice over Fanny's magic sound voice, highlighting her professionalism. At the same time, she had already thought about how to let her public relations team guide tomorrow's online public opinion, and she must portray herself as a little girl who was bullied by her cousin since childhood, and then curse Fanny, the bitch. Oh, and that lackey, he must be blackened to death. This battle has come to an end, and everyone is really unsatisfied. It was indeed mediocre at the beginning, but the extra inserted later was really wonderful. The result should have ended uneventfully, but Nanling suddenly said, "Speaking of which, do you think there will be a lot of people who will come out to slander us tomorrow?" Fanny was stunned for a moment, and then realized what Nanling was talking about. She thought about it, and then smiled and said, "Who cares? Anyway, we don't like to go online. Just treat it as the barking of a loser. It can't really do anything to us." Her thoughts were clear. But Miss King Fei's thoughts were not it again. She really hated it. Chapter 214 My Spiritual Power. Fanny was clear-minded and happy, but Nanling seemed to be in big trouble next. He had completely offended the little princess of the Gu family, Miss King Fei. But it didn't matter, he didn't care about it at all, because he didn't think he could have any kind of relationship with Miss King Fei. Limit his resources in the ancient domain. Cut. He practiced wind magic, and his demand for resources in the ancient domain was limited. He even preferred to experience the current way of cultivation carefully by himself, rather than piling up excess resources. Anyway, his foundation building cultivation has reached the 7th level smoothly over the past period of time, which is already very fast, and there is no need for any external force to bless. His energy is still constantly strengthening his body, and even his brain is continuously strengthening, making his thinking ability stronger and stronger. This active thinking makes him always want to think about something, so because of the finger casting spells he had tossed out before, and thinking of his fire talent that had been buried, his thoughts were suddenly completely opened up. So during the Galaxy Immortal Guest Assessment, he was deeply immersed in the world of finger seals and found another spell casting system for himself. It was really interesting. This was a spell casting system that did not exist in this era. He had to figure it out bit by bit. Wind Fire Wheel. This was a new spell he developed. 3 blazing flames were dragged by a sine cyclone and spun rapidly, just like a wheel of flames. As for the lethality, well, it might be used to make the ingredients extremely evenly heated if used for barbecue. That's right, the new spell he developed was a cooking spell, because it was ultimately a limited fire spirit power triggered by finger seals, and it was difficult to form any real lethality. Therefore, even if this level of flame was finely controlled, it could only become a cooking spell. During this process, Nanling saw a prompt. Your fire control technique has reached LV5. It was a long-awaited update of the information panel, and Nanling felt quite happy when he saw it. At the same time, he also found the real use of fire control in his knowledge system. This meant that he could not exert much powerful combat power, but simple manipulation and control in daily life did not require such powerful power. Sometimes he even forgot to coordinate the finger gestures when controlling fire, and a thought triggered a stream of fire to form the effect he wanted, which made him feel very happy, even happier than when he cultivated the first ray of spiritual power. He found that he had found the true meaning and goal of his practice, which was to pursue this flash of inspiration and to find this kind of control that was closer to the origin of spiritual power. This kind of control that came at all made him feel like a god who controlled everything at that moment. It was for this reason that he suddenly re-examined his foundation building practice. The spiritual A composed of wind spiritual power shone brightly in his body, but were these things really necessary for him? It seemed not to be the case. He once again turned his attention downwards and saw the burning fire of life in his body. He was shocked to find that this was his real foundation, this was his foundation building. The fire of life, the thick and constantly emitting essence, is broadening the foundation of his existence as a living being. His consciousness sank into the flame and felt it carefully, and then he felt that something was breaking out of the shell. His own pure will, the flame of his own existence, was hatching a kind of concept of his own existence. This should be a very shocking thing, but Nanling didn't have any thoughts at this time. His mind was still pure and he maintained his greatest enthusiasm for cultivation, observing and experiencing the process. Something changed in his body. He felt a kind of self-existence concept began to flow in his body. This power was so wonderful, like airflow and streams, born from the furnace in the lower mountain, flowing through the whole body very smoothly. It touched the wind spirit power, and Nanling could feel it so clearly that it seemed to be able to easily accept the wind spirit power, and even accommodate it in its own attributes. But Nanling didn't want to do this. So this power seemed to sense his thoughts, and immediately pushed away the wind spirit power and flowed leisurely in his meridians. Then Nanling suddenly discovered that the wind spiritual power in his body was actually the power of the self-existence concept integrated into this wind spiritual power. This is the so-called refining of external spiritual power. Nanling was surprised to discover this fact, and then he further discovered the so-called purification of spiritual power, that is, the concentration of this self-existence concept in the spiritual power in the body is getting higher and higher. Even, Nanling suddenly thought of something. He separated a strand of the purest self-existence concept, and then with a thought, he gave it the characteristics of wind spiritual power. This wind spiritual power instantly created the wind of existence as if out of nothing, and then blew a storm in front of him that caused a storm in front of his house. Nanling took a breath, and then he had a vague guess in his heart. If spiritual power is a kind of conceptual power, it is the concept of the external manifestation of various elements such as gold, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder, then this self-existence concept power born in his body is not also a kind of spiritual power. It's just that this kind of spiritual power belongs only to him. It's my spiritual power. Nanling began to rack his brains to figure out the theoretical basis of this my spiritual power. First of all, it's the cultivation system of this era. Unfortunately, even if he looked through the courseware of Shugyu Academy, he didn't have any original knowledge in this regard. What he saw was that the pioneers of this era discovered spiritual power with scientific methods, and then poured spiritual power into the human body, and then infused it with excess resources, so that humans started the path of cultivation in confusion. From a scientific perspective, there is no such thing as my spiritual power. So what about the knowledge of the previous life? From the limited common sense knowledge of the previous life, he found out the three words essence, energy and spirit with great difficulty. He already knew what essence was, which was the essence of his body, the essence of the power born in the flesh. He also understood what spirit was, which was his thinking power, his mind and soul. Then the key in the middle, Nanling realized that this was key. It means communication and flow. It is the bridge between the spirit and the physical body, and it is the power to pry open the illusion and fantasy. I understand, our ancestors are really amazing. They actually have such an amazing theoretical foundation, Nanling muttered to himself. Now he doesn't care that he didn't prepare more knowledge of cultivation before. Because he realized one thing. No matter how much knowledge he knows about this aspect, if he can't understand and comprehend it, then what he knows will become a hindrance to his knowledge and understanding, hindering his true comprehension. On the contrary, now that he has sensed some of his own wonders, when he wants to find a theoretical basis, even a reminder of just one word, can make him feel enlightened at this moment. This is the wisdom of our ancestors. No wonder those books are often obscure and difficult to understand. It turns out that they are not meant for cultivators to understand, but for cultivators to compare and summarize conveniently. Chapter 215. The target is here. Nanling was sure of one thing, that is, the research of this era was not wrong, the so-called spiritual power was just a tool. However, although he came to the same conclusion, his cognitive angle was completely different. He looked at it from the perspective of himself, self, and existence. He saw what the real power of his own strength should be based on, and spiritual power naturally became a tool. So that day, Mo found that Nanling had changed. He became ethereal, as if he was not a person in this world, and became extremely detached from the world. Yes, the word detached was used here. Nanling named the power of the concept of self-existence key, picking one out of the ancient characters, and he felt that it should be appropriate. At this time, Nanling was in the state of realizing his own existence, and separating his own existence from the external existence. This is out of the world. In Nanling's view, this is also a process of cultivation, in order to make his existence purer, so it is separated. And then there is no doubt that he will return to the external existence, return to the existence of the masses, and then use his unique existence to perceive the existence around him. This was the feeling that Nanling suddenly had, just like the three realms of spiritual cultivation. Mountains are mountains, water is water, mountains are not mountains, water is not water, mountains are still mountains, water is still water. Nanling was in the state of mountain is not mountain at this time. And for Mo, Nanling now seemed to be a little different from Nanling. She couldn't tell what this feeling was. She just felt that the person in front of her was close at hand, but she felt that she was out of reach. "Xiaonan, what are you doing?" Mo asked hesitantly. However, before she asked more, another floating spaceship landed outside. A person came over with a heavy face, and it turned out to be Gyunu who had conducted the entrance examination for Nanling. He stood quietly at the door of this small building, and seemed to be worried. Nanling glanced at Mo, and then said in a threatening manner, "I'm here to find you." Mo looked at his threatening look and was relieved. At least at this moment he was a little popular. She shook her head and said, "No, I'm here to find you." Nanling was stunned. Gyunu hesitated for a long time, and suddenly stood at the door of their small building and said loudly, "Come out to see me, Nanling. Nanling. ... He turned his head to look at Mo, and saw that she couldn't help but smile, and he felt speechless. Of course, he didn't hesitate, and walked out very calmly and asked, "Hello, Teacher Gyu, what do you want to talk to me about?" Gyunu shook his head and said, "Don't call me teacher, I have resigned from the position of teaching assistant, and I am here only as myself." Very good, the feeling of a man-to-man conversation is getting stronger and stronger. He looked at Nanling and said seriously, "I have investigated everything about you. I still can't believe how you made Mo agree to marry you, a person who came from the wind region and rose from obscurity." Nanling's lips moved, and then he said helplessly, "I remember that it didn't seem like this the last time I saw you." Gyunu took a deep breath and said, "Yes, because at the time I still felt that I had not lost her, but your appearance made me taste the bitterness of loss, and I don't want to go on like this. So I must figure out one thing, even if it is to make me feel relieved. You have to tell me why." Nanling looked at the room and suddenly became interested in housework, as if he had discovered the moldy Mo in the sink, and felt a deeper sense of powerlessness. So he said, "Well, I said it, because I made her feel safe." Gyunu shook his head and said, "No, it's not like that. If it's a sense of security, I can provide it. You must use other means to convince me." Nanling was originally quite annoyed by this episode in his life, but suddenly his eyes lit up and changed his mind. If you think about it from another angle, isn't this an excellent target for magic training? Without saying anything, he lightly tapped the door of the small building, and then jumped to the center of the river. His attitude was already very obvious. "Come on, Shonen." Fanner's cheers came from the small building on the other side. Nanling glared at him unhappily. Gyunu also immediately came to the middle of the river, and put on his combat armor, looking ready for a big battle. But what about Nanling? He suddenly showed an extremely wanton smile, and then took off the necklace on his neck as the core of wisdom, and even stretched out his hand to pull off the spirit furnace that served as the power of the combat armor from his chest, and threw it towards his own hut. There, Mo just came out, and she unexpectedly caught the two pieces of equipment thrown to her, looking at Nanling in astonishment, unable to speak. Gyunu said in an ugly voice, "Who are you looking down on?" As he said that, he was also ready to take off his equipment. But Nanling didn't give him a chance at all. He suddenly clenched his fist with one hand and put it to his mouth, then blew a breath. At this moment, the spiritual power between the clenched fingers had formed a ring, creating a high-speed rotating extremely condensed cyclone. And the breath he blew out was also a rapidly rotating cyclone, but the rotation direction was completely opposite. So the two cyclones rubbed against each other rapidly, producing an extremely terrifying discharge phenomenon. The powerful current bombarded Gyunu along the direction of the cyclone. Gyunu had no time to do anything else, so he could only leap and try to dodge. But the lightning cyclone also turned around and rushed over. He looked at Nanling in astonishment and found that one end of the cyclone was held in Nanling's hand, like a flexible lightning snake. Gyunu no longer hesitated, and the powerful spiritual power in the spirit furnace was mobilized, and then covered his whole body with a burning armor. Flame demon armor. Nanling had read the introduction of this advanced fire technique, which uses overwhelming flames to burn everything and destroy the effects of spells caused by all kinds of spiritual power, thus achieving a defensive effect. Sure enough, the whirlwind bombarded the surface of the flame demon armor and was dispersed by the rich and molten fire spiritual power. The fierce whirlwind dissipated at once, turning into a scattered airflow that shook Gyunu's whole body. However, the flame demon armor destroyed the spiritual power of the whirlwind, but did not stop the thunder that was rolled by the whirlwind. The thunder hit Gyunu's combat armor with a bang, causing the flames to jump for a moment. Of course, it had no other effect except leaving a scorch mark on the coating on the surface of the combat armor, but Nanling's eyes still lit up and thought that this kind of thing was worth doing. If it weren't for the defensive power of the combat armor, the power of the thunder alone would have made Gyunu feel better. Of course now, he just smiled and said, "This is wind and clouds, remember? I learned this move in front of you that day." Gyunu's face was extremely serious. Of course he remembered this, but what shocked him even more was, how long has it been? This seemingly imperfect spell has actually played a practical role in Nanling's hands. The amazing talent of the other party made Gyunu understand what Nanling wanted to express. You want to see the gap? This is it. Chapter 216. Completely defeated, Gyunu faced Nanling, feeling the aura and talent that seemed to be visible to him. He really felt that he was being suppressed. But he didn't want to admit it. Yes, he changed his mind. He didn't want to admit that he was not as good as Nanling. His eyes were full of hatred. However, Nanling didn't care about him at all. Instead, he changed his fingers and formed a fire seal. Then another storm was blown out, and endless flames swept over. Nanling laughed and said, "This is the firestorm." Of course, the firestorm couldn't cause much actual damage to Gyunu. After all, the flame demon armor on his body was a real high-level defensive fire technique. This firestorm had no effect when it bombarded the external flames of the flame demon armor, and the whirlwind even made its flames burn more flamboyantly. There's no need to use this weak trick, right? Gyunu said coldly. Nanling still had a happy expression, and was not affected by Gyunu's words at all. He said, "How about this move? Combine the cold wind spell and the whirlwind spell with the water seal." As he spoke, his finger gesture changed again, and a huge ice storm appeared in front of him, rolling up the river water. Yes, it's called ice storm. However, the performance of the ice storm did not seem to be better than the previous spells. It was just that the low temperature made the flames on the fire demon armor slightly darker, and the rest was almost the same as before. Gyunu finally said with some pride, "I told you long ago that your tricks are useless. It's my turn next." He suddenly started, his whole body burning with flames, and he drew a flaming longsword in his hand and charged towards Nanling. As if to show his strength, he actually went straight into Nanling's storm, looking very strong indeed. But Nanling was not worried about this at all. Instead, he adjusted the wind he controlled with a strange look, then the flames on Gyunu's body were visibly extinguished. But it seemed too late. The powerful kinetic energy of the combat armor came to him against Nanling's wind, and stabbed him with a sword without reason. The direction of the sword was between the chest and abdomen. If this place was properly controlled, it would not be fatal even if it was pierced. Of course, Nanling would not rely on others' control ability, and he certainly did not want to be stabbed. So he disappeared the next moment. Living in the wind, his figure blurred in an instant, and then appeared in the distance beside Gyunu. In this short moment, the distance was opened again. Gyunu wanted to turn around again, but found that the flames on his body had been suppressed, and there was no trace of the previous surging momentum of the demonic flames. He was stunned, and then looked at Nanling again. He saw that Nanling had been maintaining a kind of wind magic. This wind magic was no longer the previous ice and fire storm, but a very strange air pressure that enveloped Gyunu's whole body, and even made him feel an extreme suffocation in an instant. Not only did the flames go out, he found that he couldn't even breathe. He was affected by the spell, but he couldn't believe what kind of spell could penetrate his combat armor and directly affect him. He felt as if someone had grabbed his throat, and he couldn't breathe no matter how hard he tried. Then came the frantic warning of his own plummeting blood oxygen concentration in his intelligence core, and the sharp alarm of the life support system on the combat armor interface. Terrible spell, his eyes went dark, and suddenly his whole body relaxed and he fell into the river below. Nanling looked down at his hands, feeling the power of his wind spirit at that moment. At this time, Mo and Fanny appeared beside him at the same time. Mo didn't say anything. Fanny asked first, "How did you do it?" "I used magic to affect him without breaking the protection of the spirit furnace." Nanling pondered for a moment, then said, "Concept, the essence of magic is the manifestation of concepts. I understand. My will affects spiritual power, and then the spiritual power will show the corresponding concept and then affect the world. Before, I just wanted to try to extract the oxygen in the air to extinguish the opponent's flames, and I succeeded. By the way, the realization of this concept also affected him himself, causing him to suffocate." Mo immediately retorted when he heard this. "But the flame demon armor also has the concept of burning, it can even burn in the void." Fanny nodded. She had too many moves that could ignite in the void. Nanling heard this and said, "It depends on which side's concept is more cohesive, powerful and pure." Mo said, "It's not that simple. The reason why high-level magic is high-level is that it involves the power of concepts. But you just used the simplest and most basic wind magic concept to suppress the concept of high-level fire magic. This is incredible." Nanling nodded and said, "This is about the magical power that I discovered earlier that belongs to us cultivators. Are we just going to talk about it like this?" Fanny and Mo nodded and said, "Okay, let's talk about it when we get back." With that, the three of them returned to Mo's small building together, sat down in the living room, and opened the black iron curtain that symbolized closure, seclusion, and unwillingness to be disturbed. Gyunyu's head emerged from the waterline. When Nanling stopped casting, his life support system was restored. At this time, he looked at Nanling with a complicated expression as he led the two girls to discuss magic and cultivation theories that he didn't understand into the house and lower the iron curtain. He could only feel a strong sense of frustration in his heart. He lost, completely. Even his full armor could not defeat Nanling, who had unlocked his wisdom core and spirit furnace. His spirit furnace clearly stored an incomparable amount of spiritual power, but it was vulnerable to Nanling's understated spell. He realized the gap, which was a gap in level beyond the accumulation of quantity. At this time, he rose from the water all wet, and finally could only leave like a defeated dog. He gave up. Completely gave up. The talent he once proud of was completely crushed in front of Nanling, and he naturally had no face to appear in front of Nanling and Mo again. "I wish you happiness." He sent a blessing to maintain his last dignity, and then left with a long sigh. However, he didn't know that in the small building, the two people he sent blessings to are pressing Fanny tightly with one hand and one foot. Don't get me wrong, they are not going to do anything strange, but to persuade her. "That's enough, Fan and I, you can't break your own golden elixir again. Your body won't be able to bear it if it happens again," Mo said earnestly. Fanny struggled and said, "Let me go, how can I not try such a fun thing? This concept of my spiritual power is so interesting, let me try it too." It seems that Nanling's sharing has driven Fanny a little crazy. He quickly advised, "Don't worry, in fact, I think that your practice of fire magic and thunder magic day after day, fire spiritual power and thunder spiritual power have long become a part of your self-existence. This is also the way to practice in this world today. There is no need to start over. You just need to find your own key, that's enough." Fanny really likes to commit suicide. P.S. I am still adapting to my new job. I have to learn a lot every day. I feel that writing 3 more chapters will really squeeze out my brain power. Chapter 217 Second Light Broadcast. Fanny struggled for a while, but was finally persuaded. My goodness, what does this girl think of the golden elixir? Can she break it just like that? Mo said with emotion. Now I regret that I used so many times to infuse spiritual power. If I had progressed more slowly, maybe I could stay in the current realm with Shion and to feel the purest and most original state of this key. Nanling also shook his head and said, "If possible, I even want to start over from the key refining stage, and slowly feel the process of this power running in each of my realms. It's a pity that I can't go back, because I have actually reached this realm now, and my cognition and understanding of it are at this realm. So Boss Fanny, even if you shatter your golden elixir and start over again, then my spiritual power you cultivate will probably be the same fire spiritual power as now. It's just that because of the influence of the concept of self-existence, it will become purer and more condensed. But things like purification and condensation, you can do it yourself now, right?" Fanny couldn't help but feel melancholy when she heard it. She asked, "I'm past the time?" Nanling nodded. "It's past the time. This is different from essence. It is born based on our own cognition and will, so it will always be the way you know it." Fanny was very sorry. She felt that she had missed something very important. But Nanling said, "In fact, I think it might not be a good idea to know key from the beginning, because our knowledge and cognition at the time were far from the current level, and perhaps what we knew was not as good as it is now." This made sense and completely relieved Fanny's discomfort. Mo also sighed after hearing this. "If you put it this way, I can't imagine that my self-spiritual power can be anything other than what it is now." She looked at Nanling and said, "If I had met you earlier." What she meant was that if she had met Nanling earlier, she could have been led into this magical realm earlier. But Fanny blinked and said, "Yes, if you had met earlier, your children would have called you Mom now, right?" Mo's face turned red with anger at the time, and she chased Fanny for a while. Fanny screamed and rushed out of the iron curtain, and then a crisp laughter of chuckle came from afar, obviously feeling very happy about teasing Mo. Nanling reluctantly untied the iron curtain and walked out. He looked around and saw that Gyunu had indeed left. He then felt refreshed. Sure enough, although it was fun to think about it blindly, some things could only be understood more deeply when they were put into practice. Just like the previous fight with Gyunu, he fully realized how much the power of his spells could be enhanced under the blessing of Ki. That was the power of leveraging the concept of one's own existence to influence the outside world. At this time, Fana ran away. Mo calmed down the embarrassment caused by her slip of the tongue beside Nan Lin, and then asked, "Tonight's global selection will be broadcast live again. You may have to come up with something different by then." Nan Lin wondered. "Why?" Mo said, "Didn't you say so much yesterday? Now many people's eyes are on us. If we can't perform convincingly, I'm afraid," Nan Lin said indifferently, "we shouldn't care about this, right?" Mo said, "Indeed, with the concept of my spiritual power that you shared with us, I have completely lost interest in these worldly things. But you have to know that we are not independent individuals after all. We are all Fana's team, and Fana is closely related to her father. Too many people are involved in this chain of interests. We must consider the feelings of others." Nan Lin stopped him. "Okay, I roughly know it, then let's come up with an amazing tactic tonight. Well, I'm still the chief tonight, and I will directly recruit Aunt Liji as the second seed, but I will recruit Thongshi for the third seed this time. You are the fourth seed, wait for Fana to come out and then we will attack. We will fight quickly and decisively." Mo was stunned when she heard it, and then she quickly realized and said, "Are you going to win by surprise?" Nan Lin smiled and nodded. "Yes, since they want to be exciting, I will give them excitement." Mo couldn't help asking, "Is this too risky?" Nan Lin shook his head and said, "The worst case is that they will be eliminated. Anyway, our main battlefield is here in the school." Mo was relieved when she heard it, and she immediately looked forward to Nan Lin's flash of wisdom. Ghostly Nan Lin, that really has too many ghost ideas. That night, the 5 members of the Zhuoxia Legion gathered in the preparation room again, and then prepared for tonight's global selection. Today is the day of live broadcast again, and Thongshi's face does not look too good. After all, he was sprayed on the internet for a whole day. It would be strange if he could be in a good mood. He felt that he was really cheap. Why would he want to see the evaluation of his performance yesterday on the internet? So, coward. Turtle shell. This stinky shameless guy, I almost peed on him. The official should limit this kind of shameless defense, otherwise if everyone defends, what's the point of this game? And so on. Anyway, Thongshi was scolded to the sky, and the others were not better off. But what made Thongshi unbalanced was that he found that the others seemed to be calm and indifferent, and were not affected by those remarks at all. He looked at Fanny, Nan Lin and Mo who were still discussing something in a low voice and did not dare to talk to them. He felt that the people over there were too outstanding and he really couldn't get into that circle. So he couldn't help asking Liji, "Miss Liji, don't you feel angry?" Liji turned around, and her look of seeing through the world made Thongshi feel that he was facing a kind old lady. Liji laughed and said, "Why should I be angry? Just because they say I'm a bitch? Ha, you probably don't know, I really was a bitch before." Thongshi was at a loss. He couldn't imagine what kind of mentality Liji had when she said such a thing. Liji pointed to her head and said, "But now I only have one brain left. Recently, I have become more and more aware of what I am and what my existence is. Compared to that, other things are no longer important." At this time, Nan Lin heard it and turned around to interrupt and said, "It seems that many things have the same end. Aunt Liji, you can be so sure of your existence. It seems that your digital life evolution is about to be completed." Liji smiled and said, maybe one day I can appear in front of you like a real person again," she said with expectation. Everyone wanted to say something, but at this moment, Fana said in surprise, "The official invited me to participate in the pre-match interview. What should I say?" She seemed a little timid. Mo said helplessly, "Why don't I go to the interview? You stay here and prepare well." In fact, this was her first time experiencing such a thing, but she always habitually stood up for Fanny in front of difficulties. However, this time Fanny rejected her request and said firmly, "No, I'll do it. I can't show my weakness in front of the little bitch King Fei." The other 4 people in Zhuoxia immediately had a bad feeling. Every time their Miss Fana said this, it seemed to mean that big trouble was coming. Chapter 218. A serious Miss Fanny was interviewed live. Zhuoxia's friends all showed nervous expressions. Everyone knew how willful Fanny was and how terrible she was when she was willful. In fact, Nan Lin said so much in the live broadcast yesterday, which seemed to have attracted a lot of haters on the internet, but because what he said was actually quite reasonable, there were also many people who agreed with him. In fact, among the silent majority, there were quite a few people who agreed with him. Especially some special people, their views coincided with Nanling's. The singing girls of the prosperous age seem to be a bunch of flowers, but in any case, they should not be compared with those who can really make contributions. It was for this reason that Fanny was not warned by the top leaders of the Gu family, and some people even planned to push Fanny out to compete with concubine Gu King. Of course, the top leaders were not monolithic. So Fanny had the opportunity to be interviewed and face-to-face with concubine Gu King. The host was a well-known male anchor on the internet named 11 Home. 11 Home received Fanny, who appeared in this virtual studio with very elegant conversation. There is no Gu King Fei in this studio for the time being. Obviously, the organizers also know how dangerous it is to let these two meet. When Fanny appeared in the virtual studio, all the audience in the studio made surprised sounds. Because they saw the bird's eye view during the live broadcast yesterday, they could only see Fanny from a macro perspective. Even so, the bright red color was impressive. Now that they saw Fanny's true face in the live broadcast room, they immediately felt different. It was the same fiery red long hair as Gu King Fei, but unlike Gu King Fei's smooth and delicate care, Fanny's long hair was fluffy and a little rough, but it looked very heroic and eye-catching. Her Gu family's exquisite face, brought by countless generations of genetic optimization, is not inferior to Gu King Fei's beauty, and there is also a cheerful heroic spirit between her eyebrows. Everything makes her like a vicious dog, breaking into the hearts of many boys and girls at once. She has a heroic spirit, especially at this time she is in full swing because of the competition with Gu King Fei, which is full of deadly charm. This is not only extremely lethal to men, but also extremely powerful to some women who lack a sense of security. The host 11 Home also felt that overwhelming heroic spirit, and he suddenly felt a lot of pressure, even more than in front of Gu King Fei. He was actually speechless in front of Fanny. Fanny looked at him unexpectedly, then showed a tolerant smile and said, "There is no need to be nervous, I'm not that scary." At this time, her mind moved, and she saw the hint from Nanling. "Boss, I guess it's your golden elixir that suppresses him, he is just an ordinary person." Fanny immediately followed suit and began to restrain her golden elixir. Her golden elixir is different, and the gathering of spirit and energy makes her whole temperament have a kind of earth-shaking change, and naturally there is a special feeling of higher life. 11 Home calmed down and said, "I'm sorry, it's our first time meeting, you're just too amazing." Fanny smiled, "Am I scary?" 11 Home shook his head repeatedly, he was at a loss like a young boy. But he was professional after all. He calmed down and said, "I just haven't seen a woman as charming as you." Fanny smiled again and said, "Then you have to be careful, the most charming woman in our Zhuoxia army is Ling Yemo, the one you call the Aurora Goddess. You have to be mentally prepared when you see her, don't be speechless." Everyone just thought she was joking. But in fact, when Fanny appeared in public seriously at this time, she did show an extremely outstanding temperament. 11 Home quickly changed the subject. "Let's talk about your team Zhuoxia. What enabled you to form such an outstanding team? In other words, what makes so many outstanding people gather under your command?" Fanny said with a calm, gentle and hostile look. No, I will call them by the code names you are familiar with. Goddess Aurora is my good friend who grew up with me. The Silent Iron Wall was also one of my childhood playmates. Gimmo and Falcon were the partners I recruited when I drove the hunting ship out to explore. Now they are all my good sisters and brothers. So our team has always existed, and it was not specially formed for the Galaxy Fairy." 11 Home nodded repeatedly and said, "We still have some time. Can you share your adventure stories?" Fanny laughed and said, "Of course, like on that adventure, we accidentally discovered a planet with original mineral veins. That was the story of when the Zhuoxia discovered the colorful disk galaxy." To be honest, Fanny's eloquent narration was quite fascinating, especially when everyone finally learned that Fanny had sold this adventure for 10 billion, and everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. But then when Fanny said that she paid a landing module worth 8 billion for this, and because of various renovation costs, she almost couldn't pay the crew's wages in the next adventure, everyone smiled again. Nanling also smiled. Yes, the crew member who almost couldn't pay the wages was him. 11 Home was also very impressed after hearing this. He said, "It's really an interesting experience, but time is limited and we can only stop here. I hope to invite Miss Fanny to our show next time and tell us those interesting experiences again." Fanny said indifferently, "I hope so." Then the 11th Home said with a serious look, "The competition is about to start, but before that, can Miss Fanny tell us the story between you and Miss King Fei?" Fanny twitched the corner of her mouth and sent a document to her group of friends. Nanling saw the document, and then said to the people around him speechlessly, "This is a copywriting. It seems that there is a senior manager who wants Fanny and Miss Kingfei to have a family-friendly ending of sisters forgetting their grudges with a smile." Mo pursed her lips, and then said, "Okay, they think too much." But Fanny said lightly in the digital live broadcast room, "It's nothing, just some things happened when the sisters were playing when they were young. Anyway, I don't care anymore." She had a feeling of "I have seen it all and let it go," which really made people speechless. Who was it that loved the live broadcast room yesterday and called her a little bitch all the time? Well, it feels like you let it go after you get enough of it, right? Nanling went back to the copywriting and took a look, and then magically found that what Fanny said was actually the reconciliation part in the copywriting, but the words on the copywriting were fine. Why did it seem so hateful when Fanny said it? TSK, boss, Fanny is also talented. Nanling sighed, this weird talent is really amazing. Chapter 219. Something different. Fanny is very charming when she is normal, but when it comes to her cousin Ge Qingfei, she immediately turns into a yin and yang monster. The host 11 Home felt something was wrong, but thinking of his live broadcast task today, he could only bite the bullet and continue. Then please welcome our special commentator today, Miss Kingfei. She is Miss Fanny's cousin and our most popular star. The atmosphere was hyped up, and Ge Qingfei also appeared in cheers and applause. She was like a cute girl next door, greeting the live screen with an excellent sense of camera. "Friends, hello, everyone, thank you for your support." Kingfei is very grateful. The words were good and she was able to please the audience. However, compared with Fanny, who smiled and said nothing next to her, she looked obviously weak. Her cultivation level was not bad, and it seemed that she was also at the 9th level of foundation building. But Fanny was already in the golden ellipsis stage. Originally, the difference in cultivation level would not bring such a big difference, so many people in the Ge family began to feel that as long as they had enough power, they did not necessarily need to practice seriously. Anyway, most people can't reach the golden core stage no matter how hard they practice, and even if they do, they won't look much different, and very few people can achieve the Ness and Soul stage. But Fanny's golden core really gives people a different feeling, a feeling of divine light. Obviously, concubine Ge Qing's makeup is more delicate and her clothes are more decent, but makeup and clothes are just external decorations after all, and Fanny's inner brilliance makes concubine Ge Qing look like the stars next to the bright moon, losing the brightness she should have. After concubine Ge Qing greeted the audience, she greeted Fanny in a very generous manner. "My dear cousin, I am very happy to see you shining like this now. It's very strange. It's obviously a cheerful tone, but it is also full of yin and yang flavor, as if saying that Fanny used to be ordinary, right?" Fanny responded with a smile. "I didn't expect to become famous in this way. In fact, if possible, I prefer to be an unknown pioneer and explore the wonders of the starry sky with my crew. Although the lively and bustling scene now is not bad, it is not what I like after all." She looked very calm and tasteful. But in Ge Qingfei's ears, it seemed to say, "My stupid sister, what you pursue and what you cherish are not worth mentioning to me. This is the highest level of yin and yang. Others hear it as talking about the truth of life, but certain people hear it as ridicule." Ge Qingfei was silent for a while, and then asked with a smile, "So cousin Fanny, what is your original intention to participate in this competition?" This seemed to be a language trap. She was trying to make Fanny's previous transcendent speech seem hypocritical and powerless. But Fanny answered without thinking, "My original intention? Of course I want to go to the Star Federation. I and my crew have rested for long enough, and the distant Star Federation is our next adventure." She was frank and sincere, and even slowly got excited at the end. The audience looked at this beautiful girl who was excited about her dream, and they couldn't help but be fascinated by her. Ge Qingfei first felt that she had punched cotton, which was very uncomfortable. But then she looked at Fanny again, and suddenly found that her annoying cousin no longer had her in her eyes. That was the look of someone who really had ideals and practiced them. She was radiant and exuded amazing charm. There are many forces behind the Galaxy Fairy, so if she can get a place to go to the Star Federation, it will be her best chance to leave the Chugiv Star again. She will not miss this opportunity. Although Fanny is dazzling, it seems that she is about to be cold. 11 Home quickly changed the subject and said, "Okay, our competition today is about to begin. Miss Fanny, are you confident about today's competition?" Fanny smiled mysteriously and said, "Confidence. Let's show you something different today." 11 Home quickly said, "Then I look forward to the performance of Zhuoxia." Fanny's figure disappeared in the live broadcast room. In this digital live broadcast room, 11 Home couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. To be honest, Fanny was too dazzling and her aura was too strong, which made 11 Home involuntarily hold his breath when talking. When Fanny left, he let out this breath, which made him feel mentally exhausted. He was amazed at the terrifying power of such a big man, but the shadow still lingered in his heart. He could only reluctantly say, "Okay, let's watch this game. I'm looking forward to what Miss Fantasy Different will be like." Then the light and shadow in the live broadcast room dimmed, and the scene in the preparation space of the two sides appeared instead. After the last live broadcast, it is obvious that the organizer has many new tricks this time. Of course, the focus of everyone's attention this time was on the Zhuoxia army, and the audience came to see them. However, unlike the intense discussion of their opponents, the Zhuoxia army was quiet. They did see the Aurora goddess, who was more elegant than her in Fanny's words, most cold and noble temperament, was like a real goddess, and she was really outstanding. And such a goddess would occasionally look at the young man nicknamed Ghost Strategy, who seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, occasionally showing warmth and care. This makes people jealous. At this moment, the countdown to the battle began, and Nanling suddenly opened his eyes. At that moment, his eyes were as bright as the stars. Everyone who saw this scene was attracted by this pair of eyes full of wisdom. However, before they could appreciate it, the battle had already begun. This time, the Zhuoxia army still started with double warriors. However, there was a subtle difference, that is, Ghost Strategy summoned the Falcon, who was best at reconnaissance at the first time. At the same time, it also left 2 reconnaissance aircraft for Falcon. As soon as Li Ji appeared, she controlled 2 aircraft to explore in 3 directions with herself. This was to find out the location of the opponent's base as soon as possible. Nanling asked the production machinery to start collecting resources. Before Li Ji had explored all the star maps, she seemed to have determined the opponent's position. When Nanling got the news, she led all the production machinery and most of the materials and energy to travel together. The audience was stunned to see this operation. They couldn't imagine how bold it was to make Nanling make such a decision. At this time, Li Ji really found out the location of the opponent's base, and then started an amazing ace-flying warrior tactical action, which caused great interference to the opponent's base construction. However, the opponent obviously had a way to deal with it when he came to this stage. He quickly built a defensive firepower network in the base, making Li Ji's riot gradually less useful. But this has already involved most of the opponent's energy, so when it was really impossible, she immediately withdrew. However, everyone who saw this all took a breath and retreated tactically. What did they see? That ghost plotter actually took advantage of the opponent's base, dealing with Li Ji's harassment, and directly photographed a defensive fortress at the end of his vision. When the opponent reacted, Nanling had already begun to organize defense with the help of this fortress. Tower Charge. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 220. Caring Person. Nanling used a very cool operation this time. The Tower Rush tactic. He built the defense directly at the opponent's doorstep, and then collected resources nearby to develop the base. It was indeed a waste of a wave of precious resource collection period in the early stage, but as long as he established this subbase, the opponent's development space would be completely restricted. Just like now, Nanling watched the opponent mobilize all the soldiers in the base to attack the defense he built as if waking up from a dream, and couldn't help but smile brightly. Sorry, his defense has been established. Seeing that the opponent ran into his fortifications, he had to make some arrangements at first, and even participated in the battle and fired 2 shots from a distance. But as the defense became stable, the opponent's offensive was as ridiculous as an ant trying to shake a tree. Nanling saw that the resources had been accumulated almost enough, so he summoned the red stone, and then smiled and retreated to the second line to develop the original base. No matter how radical you are, you have to be steady, right? Li Ji led the team to cruise around, harassing them while blocking the route they wanted to survive, completely locking up the opponent. Thongqi looked at his offensive fortifications in front of him, and felt that Nanling had opened a new door for him. Then he began to continuously organize defenses and advance step by step towards the opponent's base, and he actually used his fortifications as a siege tool. Thongqi exerted his computing power and defense organization ability to the extreme, and showed unparalleled offensiveness. The result was that the defense of the opponent's base was disintegrated one by one. They were not as good as Thongshi in organizing defense, and the layout of defensive facilities was not reasonable. Thongshi was like a war maniac who built a wall to the opponent's lair, and fought the most violent battle in the most conservative manner. The opponent could not accumulate a decent force at all, because gradually their production areas were all included in the attack range, and then they collapsed. Nanling provided logistical support to Thongshi throughout the whole process, and Li Ji did not move at all later. Of course, her role was crucial. Thanks to her harassment in the early stage, Nanling was able to take down a base. In contrast, the red stone that shined in this battle was not so crucial. He reaped the tactical dividends that Nanling and Li Ji had fought for in advance. But no matter what, this tower rush was definitely an eye-opener for people of this era. Can this game be played like this? No one thought that the short battle just now was not exciting enough. They were shocked by this new tactical idea and screamed continuously, and at the same time, their minds were completely opened. Originally, King Fei and the host were supposed to have a few more words in the live broadcast room at the end of the live broadcast, but they didn't expect the number of people in the live broadcast room to drop sharply. At this moment, everyone had no intention of watching the excitement and beauties. They had already made an appointment to open a game and must try this tower rush tactic. Seeing that the popularity of the originally popular digital studio dropped sharply in a short moment, King Fei also felt very confused. However, the thing that really confused her was still to come. After the live broadcast ended, the hottest topic on the internet had changed from Zhuoxia Army is arrogant and conceited to Zhuoxia Army's new tactics and related topics. All those who participated in and followed the game of Galaxy Shirank were discussing the new tactics displayed by Nanling in the live broadcast. Everyone was very excited. What peerless singer Miss King Fei! This is a game competition, not a concert. If you want to get traffic, just be good and don't make trouble. King Fei could only grow weeds in her heart in this situation. She was helpless, unless she also had a Shirank army, but it seemed too late now. On the contrary, Zhuoxia was full of laughter. Thongshi was completely enlightened, and he thought this was a vindication for himself. The only one who was not so good was Fana. She thought she could show her power, but Thongshi did all the work. This was different from what was agreed upon. It was agreed upon that Thongshi would block their door and let her end it in the end. But, Thongshi couldn't help but smile and said, "They are too weak. I didn't expect that they couldn't hold on like this. I'm sorry, miss. I really couldn't help it." Fana sighed faintly, "Forget it, it's nothing. As long as you are happy." Then she stopped talking to this tactless guy. She found that she still liked to be with Nanling after all. Mo was also someone she could trust completely, but she was too nagging. Mo could also take her feelings into consideration and put her at the center, but she was too nagging. Mo was definitely the best subordinate and good sister, but she was too nagging. Fana really liked Nanling. She always felt that she could be happy every day with him. Even if she was not happy at first, Nanling would make her happy quickly. So in her opinion, the current situation was perfect. Nanling continued to be by her side to make her happy, and by the way, he also shared Mo's nagging with her. "Xiaonan, I decided to give you a raise." Nanling? Question mark, question mark, question mark. 3 question marks appeared on his forehead. Was it so sudden? Mo was still able to see clearly. She said with a smile, "I know. I will re-sign a contract for him later." As for what kind of contract Nanling's wife would sign for him, that was not discussed. Fana then looked at Nanling and said, "In the next game, are you going to use any new tactics?" Nanling just got a salary increase and felt energetic. Hearing this, he immediately said happily, "Of course, I have a quick charge tactic, and I need talents like you, Boss Fanny, to operate it." Fanny was very satisfied and confirmed again that Nanling could be completely trusted as long as the money was in place. So in the live broadcast on the second day, the Zhuoxia army created a record. The fastest winning record. Li Ji started first. All her resources were configured for combat, and only 2 production machines were configured. But she did not summon the second general immediately, because the configuration of so many combat machines had a relatively high demand for energy, so the supplies were a little insufficient. But it didn't matter. When Li Ji found out the location of the opponent's base, the 2 production machines had collected enough supplies, and Fanny was summoned from the main base. Then, she pulled up all the battle machines and rushed to the enemy's base. The battle ended in the most violent and unsuspenseful manner. Because with the rise of Zhuoxia, Nanling's opening of 2 warriors has become the current mainstream mode. In other words, this base has no initial defensive force. It just accumulated some military power with great difficulty during the period of Zhuoxia's reconnaissance and attack, and then was easily wiped out by Fan. King Fei, who was still invited to explain, was preparing to perform well this time, but before she had time to show her style, everything was over. Ha ha ha, now you all know how powerful I am. Fanny was satisfied. Otherwise, how could she say that Nanling was her most satisfied subordinate? So consider it. Chapter 221. 8-4. Nowadays, the live broadcast of the Galaxy Immortal Guest Selection Competition in the Ancient Domain has completely become a place for Nanling to show off his skills. The one-way flow like Fan cannot be used frequently. After all, if the opponent is prepared, it is actually difficult for them to fight. In Nanling's tactical system, Li Ji's reconnaissance ability is absolutely the top priority. Before Li Ji detects the opponent's situation, Nanling will always carry out some resource accumulation work step by step. Once Li Ji detects the opponent's position and determines the opponent's development direction, Nanling can make tactical adjustments accordingly. If the opponent focuses on defense, then Nanling can immediately invest all resources in production and expansion, saving a lot of resources that should have been invested in combat. If the opponent is exploding troops, then Nanling will immediately organize defense and let Li Ji harass and contain. If the opponent chooses balanced development, then Li Ji can harass first, and then make corresponding adjustments according to the opponent's adaptability. However, one thing is certain, that is, Li Ji's reconnaissance ability is the root of all these tactical changes. During this period, they did not encounter two generals who were as fast as them. But from the perspective of base development, the computing power of two generals is not needed at the beginning. And one of the two generals must be responsible for the most important reconnaissance and delay work in order to fully exert its power. Otherwise, it is better to start with a single general and then focus on developing the base. However, in the quarterfinals of the school battle, the Zhuoxia army finally encountered difficulties. That is, the opponent has an ace pilot who is not inferior to Li Ji. The two sides met unexpectedly during the reconnaissance process, and then entangled with each other and exchanged pieces. Nanling was not surprised at all. He thought it was normal to have such an exchange. So he simply operated the base with all his strength. At this time, the competition was about operational ability. Look, this is the importance of an excellent scout. If the opponent does not have such a person to exchange pieces with Li Ji, then it will fall into a comprehensive tactical disadvantage. But now Nanling faces two choices. One is to continue to focus on operations, quickly expand its own base, and then compete with the opponent in operational ability. In this regard, they should have a lot of advantages when all four of them can operate. The second is to organize a military force first and directly fight with the opponent. In comparison, the first option is more stable, while the second option can make the boss happy. What else do you want? Nanling immediately summoned Fanny after accumulating enough resources, and then waved his hand and said, "Go, boss." Fanny really went. She and Nanling have now formed an excellent tacit understanding, and she knows what she is going to do as soon as she appears. Immediately let her know that Nanling has accumulated and rushed straight to the opponent's base. The opponent's response was very appropriate, and Fanny soon met her opponent. A team led by a genius student from the Commander Academy stood in front of her. The two sides started a fierce and suffocating but not tragic battle. Because both sides knew how precious this military force was at the moment, and it was definitely not something that could be easily wasted. From this point of view, Fanny has actually grown up. Now it is another stalemate. Nanling was not in a hurry about this. While paying attention to the battle situation ahead, he constantly adjusted his allocation of resources. He saw that Fanny actually had a slight advantage in the ratio of military damage, which made him feel quite gratified, so he also made some improvements in resource allocation and paid more attention to development. After all, even if he increased his support for Fanny at this stage, he still couldn't take down the other side's base in one go, and it would cause additional losses. So instead of doing that, it would be better to take this opportunity to open a branch base. Thongqi is the fourth seed. When the other side also has a super scout, the defensive organization ability is the most important point of the branch base. Thongqi's second base was indeed discovered by the other side, and then a surprise attack force was sent. The opponent's sneak attack was also quickly discovered by Li Ji, so Thongqi had arranged a tight defense and had to slow down the development of the base. The opponent made a tentative attack and soon realized that Thongqi was difficult to deal with. He immediately withdrew his own forces and then gathered a force to attack the main base controlled by Nanling. This really played a time difference. Thong's base was not developed and could not allocate resources for support, while Nanling only hit some defensive fortifications and the military forces in Fanny's hands, which was definitely the weakest time. But this is the price. After Li Ji detected the opponent's movements, Nanling did not hesitate to recall Fan and I, and then relied on the limited defensive fortifications of the base to carry out a thrilling defensive operation. Zhuoxia's main base was rarely attacked fiercely, and Nanling resisted the opponent's attack together with Fan and I under this situation. It looked shaky. But even in this shaky situation, Nanling actually accumulated a batch of resources and summoned Mo to open another sub-base. This is definitely a move that no one could have thought of. Especially when the opponent's ace scout had to fight with Li Ji while monitoring the situation of the Redstone base, he really didn't expect that Mo's sub-base had been quietly built. And even so, the opponent's attack only destroyed some of the outer buildings of Zhuoxia's main base. In the case of huge casualties, it was not able to completely destroy Zhuoxia's main base. This situation is absolutely unacceptable, but the opponent still chose to retreat very soberly. Because if they continue to fight, they will really have no hope. After all, the Redstone base has begun to enter the stage of military accumulation. Sure enough, when they were withdrawing, Fanny attacked instead, in order to contain the main force. And Thongshi also launched an attack directly against the other party's main base. This movement was naturally detected, and the two sides immediately changed their offensive and defensive positions. The current situation is that the military forces of the Redstone base attacked the other party's main base, while the other party's main base relied on defensive facilities for defense. The main forces of both sides continued to fight and wander on the vast star map, but did not dare to really try their best. The Zhuoxia main base controlled by Nanling immediately licked its wounds and resumed production. However, this stalemate only lasted for a moment. When Mo led her forces to appear in another direction of the other party's main base, the other party decisively chose to surrender. It was really a quick decision, knowing that there was no hope for them. After the battle, Fanny was fine, but Li Ji, as a cyborg, felt exhausted. Li Ji collapsed on the sofa of Mo Xiaola at the time, moaning, "I feel like my brain is going to burn." She really fought from the beginning to the end, and she tried her best to suppress the opponent's super scout. Nanling said with some distress, "Aunt Li Ji, you can actually rest in the middle and late stages." Li Ji buried her head, but raised her arms and waved them, saying, "I did it on purpose, because in this game I completely got rid of the super brain controlling the computing power, and I found that this seems to be a good direction for training." Nanling said expectantly, "That's great, maybe it will soon become a digital life." Fanny cheered. "We are now the top 4 of the school, and in 2 more games, we can set sail again." Nanling looked at her happy look and shook his head helplessly. He felt that even if they didn't get a place in the finals, they could actually leave. It's just that this young lady seems to be cheating her father, but in fact she still cares about the situation of her father Gichen. Chapter 222 Hidden Dangers revealed. This 8-4 college match was very exciting. Both sides showed extremely high quality and fought fiercely from beginning to end in many aspects. It soon became a very important match for reference. Even the video content of the college match, which should not be broadcast live, quickly spread on the internet, which made most people in the ancient domain realize how the real high-end game of Galaxy Fairy should be played. First of all, an ace pilot is the prerequisite. The game between Li Ji and the ace pilot on the opposite side in this video has almost become a textbook teaching information. The game between Nanling and the opponent in operation is also deducted frame by frame, analyzing the performance of the two in the operation process, and what makes the gap between the two sides suddenly widen in the later stage. How did Nanling open 2 sub-bases in succession under the high-intensity battle throughout the whole process? Finally, it is extremely important that the amazing exchange ratio brought by Fan and I's command on the front battlefield. Even if both sides are very careful, as the entire video is constantly disassembled and counted, Fan and I's exchange ratio of no less than 0.3 throughout the whole process has become an extremely eye-catching existence. They began to find that although Nanling's operation was very accurate and bold, Fanny, who played this exchange ratio, was the real key. If everyone didn't feel how strong the Zhuoxia team was at the beginning, then the video of the 8-4 elimination match of the school battle now gave everyone an example. Every position must be occupied by outstanding talents, each doing their own job. And it was in such a noisy background that Nanling suddenly received a private message from a stranger. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., 20 store of Space Station No. 5, I hope to meet with Mr. Nan. Nanling looked at this inexplicable message and felt a strong sense of jadoo, wondering why personal information is still so easy to be stolen in this era. According to the inertia of his previous life, he just thought it was a fraudulent text message, so he didn't take it seriously at all, and just blocked the stranger's ID information. How desperate was he to care about such a thing? However, not long after, he received another message from another strange ID. Mr. Nan, please believe our sincerity, there is no need to be so decisive. Nanling immediately became cautious upon seeing this. He naturally felt aversion to such unclear text messages, and resolutely blocked this ID. Then, without any hesitation, he set his smart core to intelligent shielding mode, that is, only receiving messages from people he was familiar with. However, to his surprise, another text message came, signed by Li. Mr. Nan, you shouldn't be so defensive against us. We value your talent very much and hope to establish a deep friendship with you. Nanling's brow suddenly frowned, and he immediately turned his head to look at Mo, who was sitting on the windowsill with his eyes closed and concentrating, and said, "Help me see where Li is." However, at this time, the message came again. "Don't worry, there is no problem with your cyborg friend. We just borrowed her communication channel for a while." Nanling's expression became even uglier. He found that what he encountered was not an online fraud gang, but most likely a group of dangerous guys. Digital life. Or some authority dogs. Mo stood up immediately after hearing his words. She heard an unprecedented seriousness in Nanling's words. Then she immediately sent a message and confirmed, "Sister Li is at work." Nanling took a deep breath and said, "Let her come back. Let Fanny ask for leave for her recently. Don't go out again." He felt very heavy in his heart because he realized that it was the flaws of Li, the cyborg, that were exploited. If it weren't for the digital life, then the cyborg group really had too many loopholes that could be exploited. Mo was a smart girl and she realized something immediately. So she stood up without hesitation and said, "Don't delay, let's go pick her up." Nanling also stood up immediately. He knew that Mo was right. But at this moment, the other party sent a message with Li's ID. "You don't have to be so nervous, really, this will only make us do some reluctant actions." Nanling's expression became fierce, and he said, "They are now threatening me with Li, and they should have monitored the information you sent." Mo was also stunned, and then his expression became cautious and said, "Two choices, compromise or confrontation." At this time, Fanny roared in the communication channel, "Compromise. Once you start to compromise, they will always use it to threaten you, it's better to." Her voice stopped abruptly, and then she said, "Sorry, Shonen, Thongchi and I are both in Taikoo No. 5, and we are now rushing to Sister Li's location. But how to do it specifically, I think Shonen should make the decision. After all, Sister Li is still the closest person to Shonen." Nanling certainly understood this truth. He hesitated for a moment, and his expression became more and more solemn. At this moment, Nanling saw that Li's signal suddenly stopped. He was stunned, and then immediately said, "Let's go." As he dressed, he took Mo's hand and said, "I'm going to fly with all my strength." Mo nodded. She knew that Nanling was going to use the wind escape technique to the extreme. However, at this moment, he received another message on his panel. "It's a pity that it turned out like this. This is not our intention." Nanling immediately shut down his intelligence core, and then connected his mind to the auxiliary instrument, directly using his own brain instead of the intelligence core to control the equipment. He knew that this day would come sooner or later, so he had already made preparations. The wind escape technique was activated, and he took Mo straight up to the sky. This was to directly use the mind to adjust the spiritual power in the spirit furnace to operate, and to adjust it with the flowing wind, highlighting the great power to create miracles. Of course, his control ability is not weak at all, but it is not as good as when he uses his own spiritual power. Nanling took Mo all the way to the outer space, and then turned on the wingsuit at full power, and went to the Taikoo No. 5 space station at full speed. However, even if they rushed, they arrived at the Taikoo No. 5 space station 10 minutes later. What's more, when they came to the special passage for daily access, the entrance of the passage was actually kept sealed. "Refused to recognize our identification code?" Nanling asked. Mo said, "No, our identification code passed, but this passage shows abnormal failure." Nanling made a prompt decision. "Sister, open the door." Mo was slightly stunned, then she stretched out her hands and released an extremely strong magnetic field towards the door. The failure of this door was obviously caused by human factors, so Mo simply used the magnetic field to force it. Anyway, their identification code had passed, so this way of entering the door could not be considered a violation. To be honest, this was the first time that Mo had exerted his full control of the magnetic field after completing the breakthrough of the Jindan realm. It was very strong, unprecedentedly strong. The terrifying magnetic field radiated out, and even if Nanling was only affected, many of his combat armors also failed or restarted at the same time. Mo exhaled and said, and stretched his hands to both sides, and the door really began to separate to both sides little by little, with a stutter. Nanling felt weird in his heart, and could only sigh, my wife made a fool of herself. Chapter 223. Li Ji is missing the strength to pull up mountains and rivers and the courage to conquer the world. Nanling watched Mo open her hands, and a gap appeared in the huge gate at the entrance of the passage for people to pass through, and he felt quite emotional. He had a wife who could pull out a weeping willow. Let's go. The gate opened a little, but it was enough for the two of them to pass through. Mo called out, and then took Nanling to quickly pass through the gate. However, what made them look cautious was that they found that all the checkpoints ahead began to close the road. Mo was about to perform electromagnetic control again. Nanling held her hand and said, "Don't worry, just escape with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he performed the wind escape technique. Mo quickly dispersed her protective spiritual power and let Nanling take her to rush. This time, she also experienced what it meant to get through a gap. This wind escape technique was already the ultimate under Nanling's control, and it even made her feel a little bit integrated into the wind. After coming out of the wind, they had completely entered the inner space of the Taikuno 5 space station. She sighed with a complicated look and said, "It's a pity that there is no method to practice the lightning escape technique in my family." "If there is," Nanling turned his head and looked at her and said speechlessly, "does this require a special method to practice? Isn't it natural to learn after reaching a certain level of control or perception? Anyway, I haven't learned any method to practice the wind escape technique. It's just that after the wind control technique reaches LV9, I will slowly learn it by myself." This is as if his wind technique will grow out of his brain by itself. Mo, on the other hand, agreed after careful thinking. It makes sense. Is perception natural? But how to do it? Nanling was surprised. It seemed to be like this. He didn't have such a high level of perception of wind, but Mo seemed to be unable to perceive lightning on Chuxing. Because Chuxing didn't have thunderstorms. He thought about it and said, maybe we can make a small-scale atmospheric simulator. Then he quickly put this idea behind him. Now is not the time to talk about these things. Aunt Li Ji is still waiting for him to rescue her. They quickly arrived at the place where Li Ji's signal disappeared. It was a huge machine room that was still humming. It was one of the data centers of the space station, and countless information was transferred and flowed here. Nanling muttered solemnly, "What is she doing here?" Fanny had already walked over from another direction. She said with a cold expression, "I have asked her men. She came here to investigate a case of information theft. She suspected that someone had done something here, so she came to check." Nanling immediately thought of his own experience. Could it be because of this? He couldn't help but speculate, was Aunt Li Ji taken away by the person she was investigating? No, this is a trap. This is a trap they prepared for both me and Aunt Li Ji. He figured it out at once. He said, they had been planning to deal with Aunt Li Ji for a long time, which led to this case. They wanted to take her away from home without anyone noticing. As for me, since I have never left home, they tried to get me to leave home and come to this space station before taking action, but obviously they failed. Nanling's expression was actually a little relaxed when he said this, because he had realized that Li Ji did not suffer all this because of his decision. Both of them were the targets of these people. Fanny's face turned ugly. She said, "They are coming for me." Just as she finished speaking, a cubic light screen suddenly appeared in the room full of information pipelines, and then a voice ripple appeared on the light screen. "Correct answer, give Fanny." This was a specially processed voice, just like the sound of radio waves beating to combine different audio frequencies, low and messy. Fanny snorted coldly and said, "No matter who you are, you have made me angry." The voice didn't mind. It said, "I just need to achieve my goal, and I don't need to care whether you are angry or not. And now, my goal has been achieved." Fanny's face turned completely cold. She said, "No, your goal has not been achieved yet, otherwise why would you come out to talk to me?" Yes, you must have taken away Falcon Leegi for the place in the Galaxy Fairy Finals, so we have no Ace Scout. But you feel unsafe, so you want to use Sister Leegi to threaten me. Fanny said firmly. The voice said, yes, if you give up, I will return Leegi to you. Speaking of which, Mr. Nan is too cautious. Otherwise, our goal has been achieved, and I don't have to take the risk to negotiate with you. Indeed, losing Leegi Juxia may still allow them to fight against the enemy, but if Nanling is lost, then the next semi-finals and finals are almost doomed to failure. Nanling and Mose didn't listen to what was being said over there. They swept the entire machine room with their divine thoughts, trying to find some useful information. Then Nanling's expression moved slightly, and he caught something. Mo also woke up and looked at a piece of ground that seemed to have no problem, but this piece of ground was unusual in their divine thoughts, because there was a shallow layer of water stains on the ground. This water stain was very special and could avoid almost all detection devices, but it was only observed by the divine thoughts in this shape. But Nanling and Mo are very familiar with this kind of water, which was the inert proton water produced from the Pluto star system. Obviously, the people who kidnapped Leegi seemed to have no knowledge of this inert proton water. They were probably used to obtaining information with various detectors, but ignored the most important naked eye observation. So, Nanling saw the water line extending in that direction. The water here was almost dry, but the inert protons full of inertness still remained on the ground. Then Nanling and Mo came to Fanny's side tacitly and nodded to her silently. Fanny took a deep breath, not wanting to talk nonsense with the person who was talking. She said, let's go. She was straightforward and immediately led the two people to follow that direction of the inert proton water droplets. At the same time, she also sent a message to Nanling and Mo, I have asked Thongship to prepare our Zhuoxia. In case, we must always be prepared to run away. Nanling and Mo looked at each other. Why do they think Fanny seems to be so excited? Although she is very worried about Leegi's condition, Fanny's appearance of not worrying about making things worse is really worrying. Nanling couldn't help but remind her, shouldn't we contact Uncle Gichen for this kind of thing? Fanny shook her head and said, tell him what he can do. Besides, it's too late for him to take action. Nanling nodded and said nothing. Then he immediately opened his intelligence core again, without even looking at the strange message that popped up on it, and sent a message to Gichen directly. Uncle Gu, Boss Fanny was bullied. Gichen immediately replied, who did it? Nanling said, I don't know, the other party is very secretive, it seems that he has a high authority. Gichen understood instantly. I will go and beat him up now. So quick and neat. Can we only say that he is worthy of being Fanny's father? Nanling asked in astonishment. Do you know who it is? Gichen said. I don't know, I will beat up all those who have grudges against our family first. Nanling. So brave, really worthy at being a father. Chapter 224. The unusually strong Leegi. Nanling told Gichen the news and didn't think much about it. He felt that he had just done something that should be done. However, when he reopened his intelligence core, he received a new message. We don't want to make a big deal out of this. You shouldn't have told Gichen. Nanling immediately forwarded this message to Gichen and said, Uncle, I guess there must be someone right among the people you want to beat up. Gichen immediately said, I saw it, so I can't let them off so easily. Then Nanling shared this message with Fanny and Mo, asking them to analyze the situation. Mo then sneered at the situation, making a big fuss. This is actually considered a big fuss. Fanny pondered for a moment and said, although I feel very uncomfortable that you involved my father, this has finally narrowed the scope of suspicion. I feel that this should be the work of one of my classmates. Directly invading the intelligence core, even if the shielding mode is turned on, it is directly using the background authority. What an ignorant guy. But the person who can use this authority casually seems to be not simple. It is precisely because Fanny is an insider that she understands that the person who can have this authority is not simple in the Gi family. Nanling had expected this a long time ago. He knew that as he promoted himself, he would inevitably encounter this kind of authority dog. He hesitated for a while, and suddenly made a rather bold decision. He wanted to continue to turn off the intelligence core, but now he decided to keep it on. Well, just open it. The fisherman went online, but this time he was very curious about what kind of fish he could catch. But there was one thing he was very concerned about. It seemed that Fanny and Mo had never worried that their intelligence cores would be affected. Sure enough, the private version of the intelligence core of this big family is different from the one sold to the public. They trapped the traces of inert protons on the ground, mainly Fanny and Mo. Their divine thoughts were much stronger than Nanling's. Jindan cultivators. After a certain degree, Mo's eyes condensed and said, "Found it, they are fleeing in that direction, 70 kilometers away." Fanny said unexpectedly, "The range of your divine thoughts is wider than mine." Mo nodded and said, "I have to say that Shionan's theory is useful. I have recently paid attention to and purified the ki in the Jindan, and my soul and spiritual power have increased significantly." Fanny was a little anxious. "I thought you were busy with the galaxy fairy like me." Mo looked at her speechlessly and could only say, "I have to go home to rest." Fanny said, "You go home to rest and practice." Mo pointed at Nanling and said, "He practices all day long at home. What else can I do if I don't practice?" Nanling seemed to hear some resentment, and he thought it must be an illusion. At the time, they had agreed that they would urge each other to practice and not think about sex before they could get married. How could you blame him for this? He followed silently and rushed out of the engine room area, and then dragged the girls with him in each hand to hurry on the road with wind escape. This speed was definitely faster than their wingsuit flying, not to mention that Fanny was not allowed to use wingsuit under the current circumstances. Taking advantage of every opportunity, Nanling quickly caught up with the gap between the two sides with the two girls. The moment he emerged from the wind escape technique, Nanling threw Fanny out. Well, this was a tacit understanding, not that he used the eldest lady as a weapon. Fanny was really excited. She liked this damn tacit understanding. She found that Nanling really understood her. She fell from the sky and landed in front of the group of three. "Stop, you have been caught." Nanling and Mo also stopped behind them. It was just very surprising that among the three people, except for the two men, the remaining one was Li Ji. Or in other words, it was Li Ji's control prosthesis. "Who told you to do this?" Fanny said coldly. At this time, Li Ji's prosthetic body suddenly spoke. "Don't embarrass them, they are just people who accept commissions." Fanny said calmly. "They are also criminals. I will teach them a lesson and get what I want to know from them." One of them said solemnly, "Miss Fanny, we are really just entrusted by others." At this time, Nanling walked up calmly and said, "If you are entrusted by others and get money from others, you must also bear the corresponding responsibilities. People give money, you take the money to do things, but you are not a good employee if you put all the responsibilities on the boss." As he said, he performed a unique wind technique on the two people in front of him, which was a type he developed recently. The two people suddenly covered their throats and tried to breathe but could not get oxygen. They began to suffocate. This is Nanling's suffocation technique. The two people tried to disperse the effect of this spell with their spiritual power, but their spiritual power was dispersed by the spiritual power filled by Nanling in the suffocation technique. Nanling has begun to touch upon the concept of the essence of spiritual power, which means that his strength cannot be simply judged by his current realm. However, at this moment, the Li Ji avatar suddenly looked at Nanling and said, "They are just following orders, let them go." Nanling suddenly felt that his intelligence core suddenly rebelled, creating a reaction force in his body. He was surprised and quickly interrupted the spell to suppress the reaction force. Then he narrowed his eyes and said, "Can you control my intelligence core?" The Li Ji avatar said lightly, "I don't want this either. I just hope we can sit down and talk calmly." Fanny said, "It's interesting to talk calmly." It seemed disdainful. But No, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "I have found out the information of these two people. They are both guests of Chuan Mansion. But I remember that there is a son of Master Chuan who studies at Chugyu Academy. He also participated in the trials this time and happened to reach the semi-finals." Li Ji's cyborg said calmly, "As expected of Ling Yino, you have found out the matter so clearly without making a sound." Mo said lightly, "Master Chuan may have really intervened in this matter, but he does not have the authority to control the intelligence core. Don't you think so, young lady?" Li Ji's cyborg was silent for a moment, and said lightly, "I don't know what you are talking about." Nanling's expression moved when he heard this, and he suddenly sent a message to Gichen. "Uncle, it's confirmed, it's Gichuan's men." "Gichen. I understand, I'll take people to beat them up again." "Wow, this action is really fast, has it already wreaked havoc in a circle?" At this time, Li Ji's cyborg's expression changed again and looked at Nanling and said, "You are really unscrupulous. Do you think this father and daughter can protect you for life?" Nanling said calmly, "I think you are the unscrupulous one. This kind of authority can't be used casually, right? Where did you get my Aunt Li Ji's consciousness?" Li Ji's cyborg said, "This cyborg is very loyal. She destroyed her own brain before I controlled her. Really, I'm not an evil person. How could I do anything bad to her? Nanling's expression suddenly turned cold when he heard this. But he was not too anxious, because the Liege he knew would not do such a thing. He just gritted his teeth and said coldly, if that's the case, no matter who you are, we will be mortal enemies in the future. I will find you out and make you pay with your life. This is more of a threat. Fanny was already full of anger and said, Yi Qingfei, I know it's you behind me. You killed my friend, and I won't let you go. The aura of the Jindan cultivator burst out, just like a terrifying demon god spewing flames all over his body. This is really furious. Fanny hadn't scolded enough, but Liji's prosthesis suddenly collapsed. It was obvious that Yi Qingfei was offline. Nanling didn't care about these, and hurried to check Liji's prosthesis. Then he found with cold hands and feet that her brain had been pierced and burned by strong electric current. How can she be so stupid? Nanling just felt unbelievable. He was so sure of his cognition that he didn't think it was true. Intense emotions churned in his mind, and then subconsciously, the spirit entered his brain, wanting to observe it one last time in his best state. Then, her. Nanling's eyes widened. Logically speaking, Liiji should be dead now, but why is her emotional fluctuation still there? To be precise, it is mainly concentrated in her head, where the super brain components are installed. Chapter 225 Transformation of Digital Life. Nanling saw the emotional aura on Liji's super brain, which was a very remarkable thing. Did it mean that Liji's super brain had human emotions? No, it might mean more. Could Liji exist as a digital life? Nanling was both worried and expectant about this, because he knew that digital life was not so easy to achieve. It was not that one could keep consciousness in the digital world by abandoning the physical body and brain. Nanling had heard Liiji talk about the difficulties of digital life. If she could not maintain her self-concept after leaving the body, she would soon be assimilated into a group of cold data and become a smarter AI. Mo was checking the super brain program for Liiji, and it was obvious that she had also thought of this possibility. She came up with the same conclusion as Nanling from another perspective. She deliberately made herself brain dead. She completely uploaded her consciousness into the super brain of this prosthetic body. This is a very bold attempt. Fanny asked in surprise. What happened to her now? Was anything destroyed when the little bitch Qingfei possessed her just now? Mo shook her head and said, no, she was just remotely controlling it. In fact, if Sister Liji's main consciousness could be awakened, she would be able to stop this authority invasion immediately, and even be able to kill along the network cable and counterattack. Don't take digital life too lightly. Nanling savored Liji's grey emotional aura and said, her consciousness is dormant. I'm not sure if she can wake up, but maybe we should try to call her. Fanny asked, how to call? Mo had already answered, of course, use the divine mind. Let's try it together. The call of relatives and friends, this should be a way to wake her up from her sleep. Fanny immediately tried it after hearing that. Her full and energetic mind probed upwards, as if trying to inject vitality into Liji's sleeping mind. Mo also tried it, but she didn't have such a full mind, but she tried her best. Nanling was different. His mind was far less powerful than the two girls, but it was full of emotion. He was different from others after all. To him, Liiji was a relative who had been with him for a long time. This feeling could even be traced back to the 3 years when they were carrying out the collection mission together on the wasteland planet. At the time, Nanling was only 14 years old, and he was really poor. How could a 14-year-old middle school boy survive in the dangerous environment of the wasteland planet? Whenever he needed something, it would always be delivered on time, even if it was within the quota. But it was always delivered on time in the past 3 years, which was an incredible thing for that level of work. Nanling had talked with Laomu a little, and at the time he complained bitterly that his supplies had never been delivered on time. This seemed to be very common at that level. Liiji had never been late for his things, which was actually a great kindness. Therefore, in the past 3 years, although Nanling and Liiji only communicated through communication, they were already familiar with each other like old friends. Then the time when they escaped from the deserted planet together was the time when they could initially build trust. This was incredible for people from the lower level areas. The family affection that developed afterwards was all based on this trust. They also carefully protected this trust together and did not let it go through any tests. Nanling had a faint expectation and a faint recollection in his heart. His mind caressed Liji's super brain, trying to find her will. He knew that when Liji's all senses of human beings disappeared, what was left was this bond. He didn't know whether this bond was strong enough in Liji's heart to pull her consciousness back from the silent sinking. But he had to try it. He couldn't let Liji work hard on this matter alone, while he, as the anchor, was indifferent. So he passed on his expectations, and his mind fluctuated, slowly echoing with Liji's emotional aura. Then he saw a touch of orange in the grey. This was a positive signal, indicating that Liji's consciousness also showed positive emotions. Nanling was delighted, and the joyful emotions were passed on. At this time, Fanny's full of vitality mind also carried pure expectations, and most faint but real concern. They were all very smart girls, and they knew what to do just by feeling the emotions carried by Nanling's mind. Nanling might be the main force, and maybe he could wake Liji's will from her deep sleep alone. But with their help, he found it much easier. He felt as if the three of them stretched out their hands together, grabbed Liji's hand in the dark cave, and then pulled her up. The emotions they passed on became more and more intense, and finally awakened Liji's will. Ah, Liji sighed softly, and her prosthetic body opened her eyes again. But this time, her eyes looked completely different. Her eyes were extremely lively, and they no longer looked like electronic eyes. "Aunt Liji, are you awake?" Nanling asked with concern. Liji nodded and said, "Actually, I know everything that happened just now, but I was not interested in anything at the time. I just watched calmly." Then, as if he felt something strange, he opened his head, took out her burnt brain and threw it on the ground. Oh my! Nanling was stunned. But at this time, his mind was most active, so he quickly stopped her and said, "Wait a minute." Liji looked at him strangely, as if asking, "What do you think of my brain?" Nanling thought it was very strange. But he really had some ideas about this thing. He looked at the two people who were unconscious due to suffocation, and suddenly said, "Maybe if we take these two people and Aunt Liji's brain to Uncle Gychen, there will be unexpected results." Fanny asked in surprise, "Dad? What did you ask my dad to do?" Nanling looked over speechlessly. How could he say that as if he was the mastermind behind the scenes? He said, "I just reported the situation here. He should be fighting with Gyuchuan now." Mo's expression changed when he heard it and said, "That makes sense. If Sister Liji doesn't mind, this can suppress Master Gyuchuan severely. Yes, it's just suppression, and it's probably not going to cause much substantial harm." Liji glanced at Nanling and said, "This Master Gyuchuan is not a good person. He has given birth to several sons, but he still wants to marry Mo as an unmarried person. This time he has to suffer a heavy loss." Nanling's expression was embarrassed. What was the matter with this posture of venting his anger for him? He said quickly, "Actually, this will allow Uncle Gyu and the others to not bear responsibility later. After all, they have already recovered the place for us." Upon hearing this, Fanny gritted her teeth and said, "Okay, then we'll take our people over here now. I must teach that bastard a lesson myself." But then she said unwillingly, "But we all know that Gyuchuan was just pushed out by the little bitch Gyking Fei to take the blame this time. In fact, all these things were caused by her. And she can only come after me. This is indeed a troublesome matter. This eldest lady is a real legitimate eldest lady. Her status is much nobler than Fanny's. She really cannot be beaten or scolded in the ancient domain." Nanling knew that Liji had finally embarked on the path of digital life and felt much better. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, Boss Fanny, that Miss King Fei will be punished." Fanny asked in surprise, "What happened?" Nanling smiled and said, "She just hacked into my intelligence core and loaded some things back from my intelligence core. There are my personal information there, but there are also some dirty things." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire space station No. 5 suddenly sounded an alarm, showing an extremely critical situation. The most shocking thing was that the ancient domain network that was supposed to cover the entire space station was suddenly disconnected. Nanling swallowed hard and said, "This should have nothing to do with me, right?" He began to worry whether he would be troubled again. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.